Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Story 1. My brother left to hike the Appalachian Mountains. What came back is him. My brother, Kevin, not his real name, I am trying to keep some anonymity, has always been outdoorsy. Growing up, he would wander off into the woods behind my parents' property and stay out there for hours. He said that being out in nature brought him a lot of peace. A few months ago, things kind of spiraled for him. He lost his girlfriend, his job, and his apartment within 6 weeks. He ended up moving back home with me and my parents to try and get back on his feet. It was hard to see him like that. I mean, he was never someone I would describe as an eternal optimist, but that little spark he always had was gone. This past spring, I found him sitting at the kitchen table in the middle of the night. He was picking apart a piece of cold pizza, and it was the first time I had seen him almost eat something in days. I told him maybe he should get back out into nature, take some hikes, or maybe do a solo camping weekend. I said that I had noticed he had seemed down lately, and maybe being out in the world could help me get back to himself. In the moment, I wasn't sure if he was really hearing me, but he took a bite of pizza, squeezed my hand, said he loved me, and went back to his bedroom. The next morning, he announced to my parents he was going to hike the Appalachian Trail. My mom was hesitant, but Kevin told her that he knew enough about himself to know that sitting at home in his room was causing more stress than if he could go out and just be in the place that made him feel most at ease. My dad just said that as long as Kev checked in every few days or so, he didn't see a problem with it. My dad pointed out that it wasn't like Kevin didn't have the experience. He was a Boy Scout turned Eagle Scout turned camping enthusiast. People do that hike all the time, Kathleen. If it were dangerous, no one would be bragging about it. I remember him saying those words exactly. I don't know why they stuck in my head the way they did, but maybe it was a way Kevin seemed to brighten up a little bit after my dad gave his blessing in a sort of roundabout way. The next 2 weeks were spent helping my brother pack what he would need, registering his hike, and buying a plane ticket to Georgia, where he would start his trip. The night he left, our mom was a mess. She kept fussing over him as if he wasn't a full-grown man. She kept asking him if he had everything he needed, and he just kept assuring her he did and would check in with us once he got to trailhead. Looking back now, he seemed genuinely excited. If I had known what would happen, I would never let him leave. My brother called like he said he would, just as he was beginning his trip. He even sent a photo in our family group chat that showed him up against a backdrop of purple-blue mountains and lush greenery. He had a thumbs up and his signature slightly off-center smirk. He wrote, "Finally made it. Love you guys. Talk when I get better reception." Over the next few days, Kevin would send a photo or video, usually of his surroundings, but occasionally he would send a selfie with the caption, "Proof of life." But as the days wore on, we stopped getting updates as frequently. What was a text at least once a day became a text once every 3 or 4 days. My dad blamed it on spotty cell reception, which made sense. It wasn't as if the messages stopped altogether, and from what I could piece together from his photos and short text bursts, he was making good time. It was around a month and a half into his trip when we realized it had been almost 2 weeks without any communication from Kevin. We called the authorities. We gave them all the information that we had, but based on what we knew, it was hard to say he was even missing. As far as the police were concerned, he had gone off-grid with the intent of going off-grid. Sending out search and rescue would cost thousands of dollars, and it could be a waste of resources, especially if there was someone else who needed it. They said they would put a notice out to the Ridge Runners, and if they saw Kevin, they were told to tell him to contact us. My mom was furious, but I couldn't necessarily blame the cops for their response. We had no evidence to support that Kev was anything but content out in the wilderness. A few days later, a text came through, just a photo of sunset, and the words, "Everything is okay here." That began the new normal of communication with my brother. There would be long stretches of time where we would hear nothing, just long enough for my mother to start panicking, and then we would get a blurry photo and a generic caption like, "Look what I saw today," or "Wish you were here." One night, while going through the photos he had sent, I realized in the background of every shot from before we called the police, there was a black smudge. It was too blurry to properly make it out, and it didn't seem to be an animal or something caught moving in the camera lens. But after the first photo he had sent after we thought he was missing, the smudge was gone. Kevin came home earlier than expected. He also hadn't told anyone his plans. One night during dinner, there was a loud, sharp knock at the door. My dad got up to answer it, and there was Kevin. His hair was long and stringy. He had grown a patchy beard over his cheeks and jaw. His lips were dry and cracked, and his gums were coated in a dried layer of blood. He was rail thin. He had lost at least 30 pounds, and he wasn't a large man to begin with. His clothes were filthy, caked in mud and debris, and his shorts looked like they had been worn thin at the sole. My mother made a sound almost like a yelp and rushed over to him. The smell coming off him made me gag. It smelled like he had smeared rotting meat under his armpits. My dad just looked at him in shock. When he finally spoke, his voice was dry and raspy as if he hadn't used it in weeks. "Mom." That was all he could say before he practically collapsed in her arms. I won't bore you guys with everything that happened after that. There was a lot of hugging, some tears, and then a very, very long shower. But something didn't feel right. Kev went to bed pretty much immediately after. He barely even looked at us. The next morning, he ate breakfast with ferocity that made my skin crawl. He was gulping down huge mouthfuls of food, barely stopping to breath. My mom just kept piling his plate with bacon, eggs, and toast. He stopped only after he consumed a whole loaf of bread, 2 packages of bacon, and nearly 2 dozen eggs. I tried to ask him about the trip, tried to get him to say anything at all really, but all I got were grunts and ahas before he lumbered back off to his bedroom. The next few days were more the same. Kept eating an insane amount of food, sleeping for hours, and then mumbling his way through conversations. It took about a week for him to start communicating like a human being again, but even then it was stilted, awkward, unnatural. He's been home for almost a month now and something isn't right. His voice had changed somehow. It's still his voice, but it's like there is a second voice buried underneath it. Like someone is trying to harmonize while he speaks. He lumbers around the house, like his knees are locked in place, but he refuses to go to the doctors. The worst part is the smell. It still won't go away. No matter how often or how long he showers, he still reeks like death. I could have maybe ignored all of this, maybe blame it on being isolated in the woods for weeks. But after what happened tonight, I couldn't sleep. That feeling of fear in my stomach I felt ever since he's been back hasn't gone away, and honestly, it keeps me up most nights. I was trying to will myself to sleep when I heard the back door creak open. I crept out of my bedroom and down the hall. From my viewpoint, I could see into the kitchen through the window into the backyard. I saw my brother, perched on his hands and knees. He was twitching wildly, like every muscle in his neck and head were spasming. He widened his stance and thrashed his head toward the ground and out of my line of sight. I was worried that maybe he was having some kind of seizure. So I ran out to check on him, and that when I saw it. His head was buried deep into the carcass of one of our neighbor's cats. He was chomping down on its tiny body, blood oozing out between the gaps in his teeth. The thing had clearly been dead for at least a day or so, its body bloated, and its eyes were dull and hazy. Kevin reached inside the cat's body and started to strip off pieces of muscle and tendon, slurping them up the same way he had been eating our mother's cooking. Pressing his thumb into the thing's skull, he popped out one of its eyes and tossed it back like a grape. I ran back into the house and locked the door behind me. I was about to run back to my bedroom when that smell hit me, that horrible death stench that had been wafting around my brother. I opened the door to his room and inched a few feet inside. Wrapped in his bedding were the decaying bodies of 20 or so animals. Rabbits, mice, squirrels. I tried to run to my parents' room to wake them up, to tell that we needed to call someone. As I turned around, I saw Kevin in the kitchen window, his body drenched in blood. He was eyeing me through the glass, his head tilted at an angle that shouldn't be possible. The vertebrae in his neck strained underneath his skin. He lunged at the window, and I screamed. My parents woke up then. They found me in the hallway, sobbing, sweating, shaking with fear. I told them what I saw, and my dad rushed outside to try and, well, I don't know exactly what he was trying to do, but it didn't matter. My brother was gone. We called the police, and they said it sounded like my brother had had some sort of mental crisis. Maybe he had picked up some kind of parasite in the woods that was impacting his brain chemistry. I know they're wrong, though. Whatever that thing is, it is not my brother. My brother left for the Appalachian Trail and never came back. I think whatever that black smudge was in those photos was something that hunted him. And I think it was successful. Whatever that thing was killed my brother, and somehow his body came back home. My brother disappeared, but I am terrified he will come back. Story 2. Our flight attendants had us close the blinds. They insist it's mandatory. They're panicked and talking about some upcoming turbulence. I began my flight around 9 hours ago. I left New York for Singapore, which would let me fly for around 19 hours, making sure it packed sleeping pills and chewing gum for my horrifying ear and jaw pain. My sinuses always act up when the pressure changes, and I dreaded this flight, especially because I had to do it alone for some conference. I listened absently to the instructions the flight crew gave us, gestures to oxygen masks, emergency exits, first aid, and so on. They mentioned the Wi-Fi, the food menu, etc. The closest attendant was a girl with a tight bun and bubblegum pink lipstick. She had an overly sober expression plastered on, and even though her lips were stretched into a smile, her eyes weren't. After the usual part, some other specifications followed. Ladies and gentlemen, please keep in mind that we will be flying very high and the pressure change might affect you. In case you are feeling extremely sick and experience very serious headaches, do not hesitate to notify the crew. We might experience turbulence when we reach a certain point, and should a critical moment occur, please do listen to the instructions of the crew and the captain and follow them precisely. I didn't really care about whatever they had to say. I doubted the crew would help my piercing sinus pain. The moment we took off, I swallowed the sleeping pills and dozed off. I had some music on and my sleeping mask on, so I got completely cut off by the rest of the plane. I remember some dreams that seemed to clog my head the way fever dreams do, of shape twisting and convulsing, bigger than I wanted them to be, stretching and taking up space, straining my mind. I remember the feeling of being held down by shapes as heavy as lead, the feeling of hotness and itchiness. This bleak and irritating obscurity was soon completely ravaged by a sharp, explosive pain reverberating directly through my jaw. The pain pierced through my sleeping pill magic and startled me awake, wide-eyed and confused at the darkness that was actually my sleeping mask, sweating and nauseous. I finally yanked it off, but I couldn't focus my eyes on anything, as pain just kept exploding like fireworks into my jaw, between my eyes and right between my throat and my ear canal. It was like nothing I'd ever felt before. I couldn't even cry or talk. I was just too perplexed, too shaken. I endured the next hours or minutes, praying for it to just end. Hammers were hitting my eye sockets and my temples, and screwdrivers were being jammed into my gums and nostrils. I felt my stomach rise up to my throat, and suddenly a terrible tightness and convulsions took over my neck and chest. My agony ended so abruptly that I could still feel the marks the pain has left, like the moment when you look directly into the sun and then luminous spots plague your vision for a few minutes. I stood there in shock, processing and cursing my stupid sensitivity. Looking over the seats at other passengers, I could spot a few pale and completely shaken faces that told me they had experienced the same pain. I was exhausted, and I just wanted to get out of this steel cage. The seat in front of me was too close to my face, the top too low, almost hitting my head, and the plane window too close. My legs felt stiff and my back hurt. I checked my watch. 7 hours in. For fuck's sake. That's it. I'm going to the restroom. I tapped the two guys sitting next to me and asked them to stand up. They both groaned and moved away. I stumbled to the restroom, overcome by dizziness. I'm going to puke in the toilet. Fine. I'm defeated. I opened the door to the plane restroom, but once I was inside, I couldn't figure out how to lock it. As I said, I was puking, so I didn't mind anyone walking over me. I poured out my stomach, and then spent another 15 minutes just splashing water over my face. Anyway, I'm mentioning this detail because I assumed the flight attendants didn't know the restroom was occupied, since it looked unlocked and no one had come out in a while. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let me hear the following conversation. Should we do it now? I'm not sure. I wasn't even supposed to take this fucking flight. Calm down. If they panic, it'll only be worse. We need to just be very, very careful. Joe. Yeah, sure. And if we crash? We won't crash. We did this many times, and nothing happened. Calm down. I just think we should dash. I unfortunately gagged really loud, and it was truly unexpected. And they heard me and stopped. I proceeded to puke some green juice. I flushed, which sounded like another engine of the plane was right there, in the toilet. Fuck my life. I opened the door and gave him an awkward smile as I hopped to my seat. The two attendants looked at me as if I were at a family function and had walked into them talking shit about me. I went back to my seat and wanted to die. I was quickly reminded of my awfully claustrophobia-inducing seat. I just wanted to go back to sleep. So I swallowed a pill and slapped the mask over my face. Ladies and gentlemen, please close off your window shades immediately. This is mandatory and for your safety and the safety of other passengers. I couldn't drift off, however, because I felt a hand over me. Hey, what the fuck are you doing? Please close your blind. The flight attendant chick is going crazy over this, mumbled the boy next to me while pulling the shade down. All of the flight attendants were watching over their own seat section. The girl watching over us was biting her lip nervously and gripping the seat with her tense fingers, her knuckles almost white. She noticed I was staring at her and gave me a grimace smile. In the dim lights of the plane, the tension was almost palpable. No one was talking. All blinds were closed. All was silent. The little tablet on my chair showed we were flying over the North Atlantic, entering the polar zone. Open ocean. No land. What exactly weren't we supposed to see? Some military ship? Some military base? I suddenly felt pressure behind my eyes. The feeling of nausea returned. I felt as if I was hanging upside down. I tried to swallow. I popped some gum into my mouth. Another 11 hours to go. Fuck me. The plane was awfully silent. And if that didn't scare me, the look of the flight attendants sure did. Their eyes were constantly darting to each shade, and they were breathing heavily. They wouldn't act like that for some fuck-ass military base. They look the way animals do when they're desperate, when they're in danger. Funny, we like to think that we are not animals. Yet, we get angry and nervous when someone stares at us for too long, even if they're doing that through a wall, or an airplane shell. I felt a knot in my throat. Hey, why do we have to close the blinds? Asked some lady from behind me. We're flying over a layer of atmospheric radiation. The glare can temporarily blind or disorient you, came the automated response. So, it's temporary. Please mind the instructions. Otherwise, you'll receive a fee. There's a real potential of damage. That seemed to shut the lady up. 10 minutes passed. Then another 10. I tried to play some music, but I couldn't doze off, and now I felt as if my skull vibrated. Maybe it did. So, did my chest. After an hour of uncomfortable silence, I was certain the low vibration in my chest and head. Somehow it felt familiar, a frequency so low but so known to me, I had no idea what to think. The frequency went higher, and then everybody could hear it. Everybody could feel the whole plane vibrate. It was a different kind of turbulence. What the fuck was that? I couldn't really place it, but it seemed very, very familiar, and very out of place. A young woman suddenly stood up and turned to the attendants. The look of recognition in her eyes ignited something inside me. When she spoke, her voice had a certain dryness. What is that? You tell me right now. The wind is very strong around here. The radiation dash. Don't bullshit me. Don't fucking bullshit me. This is my line of work. How is it possible? How? Were those screams outside? No, they couldn't be. Couldn't be. The woman plunged open the blind, but the closest flight attendant grabbed her and yanked her out of her seat with a force that had to be illegal. He then pinned her down. What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? I will sue you. Those sounds weren't human. No human could emanate those sounds. And how could they even be human? You're flying thousands of feet up in the sky. Let go of me. I need to look outside. I don't care if I get temporarily blinded. The attendants didn't flinch. They kept staring at us. And now I was more afraid of them than of what would happen if I opened the window shade. A match of screaming followed. And then the flight attendant leaned in and whispered something into the woman's ear. She went quiet. Another half hour followed, while we all stood still, awake and watched over, like some naughty kids. The lights of the plane flickered, then turned off for a brief moment. But the moment they turned back on, a scream erupted from a flight attendant, who plunged and yanked down a window shade. Some old man had lifted it a little bit. I'd only seen a thin strip of light leaking, lingering on his face, colorless and cold. What was that? Sir. He stood up. His lips moved, forming words without sound. Then the muscles in his neck tightened, and his jaw began to quake, as if something were pulling it open from the inside. I'd never seen someone so pale, shivering, teeth clattering, and eyes wide. His pupils were almost non-existent. What the fuck was that? How can it be possible? I don't understand. I don't understand. I don't. I really don't. He kept repeating, then froze, mouth parted in wonder. Then he looked up at us and muttered, "We're all going to die here." That's it. Sir, you are being escorted to the end of the plane, where you'll sit with Dash. You could escort me to hell, and I wouldn't care. You have no authority here, he mumbled, his eyes now completely darkened and mouth hanging. He left his seat, then kneeled in the middle and let out a terrible wail. No one spoke after that. They restrained him, and now he's in the back. I asked to go to the restroom, and I was granted permission. While passing his figure, rocking back and forth and unblinking, I managed to sneak in one question that bended into the frequency that encapsulated the plane. He answered between his clenched teeth, and his response had me puzzled until I reached my seat. My question had been, "What did you see?" Another half hour passed, and I glanced at the old man, only to see him cold and pale, eyes forever open. He was discreetly pulled into the cabin by an attendant. All of us are afraid to speak, but it is clear that we won't open the blinds. I wrote this with trembling hands, my chest vibrating and the pressure behind my eyes nauseating. I still have many hours left of flying above the ocean, and I can feel the unblinking gaze of flight attendants on me. I feel something coming. I feel something approaching us. I'm afraid to experience the so-called turbulence they mentioned, and the old man's response still haunts me. Those were his last words before he left us and remained unblinking, words spoken with a concerning lucidity. Tell me, have you ever stared into the eye of a blue whale? Story 3. I adopted a stray cat 15 years ago to help with my grief. She hasn't aged a single day. My name is Celine. The title of this post is something I have whispered to myself for over a decade, but never dare to type out. People worry about your mental health when you talk about ghosts. They worry even more when you tell them you are living with one. But I'm 36 now. I'm established, I'm stable, and I'm far enough away from the event to look at it clearly. I need to get this down because I looked at her this morning, really looked at her, and I realized the truth is undeniable. To understand what I have now, you have to understand what I lost. It started 15 years ago. I was 21, living in a cramped, drafty apartment in Montreal with the love of my life, Mary Ann. We were young, stupidly in love, and perpetually broke. Mary Ann was everything I wasn't. I was quiet, anxious, and prone to overthinking. Mary Ann was a firecracker. She was loud. She laughed with her whole chest, and she had the most piercing, impossible blue eyes I have ever seen on a human being. She was my anchor. Until the night I let her drive away angry. The argument was stupid. It's the cliche of every tragedy, isn't it? We fought over money. We were short on rent. And she had spent a little extra on concert tickets for my birthday. I should have been grateful. Instead, I yelled. I told her she was irresponsible. I told her she didn't take our future seriously. The last words I said to her were, "Just get out. I can't look at you right now." So she did. She grabbed her keys, her eyes swimming with tears that made that blue look like a stormy ocean, and she slammed the door. 2 hours later, the police were knocking. Black ice on the highway. She had lost control of our beat-up Honda and went over the guardrail. She died on impact. The weeks following the funeral are a blur of gray. I don't remember eating. I don't remember sleeping. Really, I just remember laying in our bed, staring at the empty spot beside me, smelling the fading scent of her vanilla shampoo on the pillowcase. The guilt was a physical weight. It sat on my chest like an anvil. I had killed her. I convinced myself of that. If I hadn't yelled, if I hadn't kicked her out, she would be safe in bed. I was a murderer. That was when the activity started. At first, I welcomed it. It began small. I would come home from my waitressing job to find things displaced. A picture frame turned face down. The cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open. The temperature in the apartment would plummet, leaving my breath visible in the air despite the radiator clanking away at full blast. My grieving mind didn't register fear. It registered hope. "Marianne," I would whisper into the darkness. "Is that you?" I assumed she was back. I assumed she wanted to tell me she was okay. But the atmosphere in the apartment wasn't comforting. It was heavy. It felt oppressive, like the air pressure before a tornado. 3 weeks after the funeral, the activity shifted from passive to aggressive. I was in the kitchen making tea. I had the kettle on the stove. Suddenly, the burner dial snapped from low to high on its own. The gas flared up with a whoosh. I jumped back, my heart hammering. I reached out to turn it off, and a mug from the drying rack flew off the counter. It didn't just fall, it was thrown. It shattered against the wall inches from my head. I stood there, shards of ceramic at my feet, trembling. "Marianne?" I cried out, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I thought it was her anger. I thought she was trapped here, furious at me for the way we left things. I deserved it, I told myself. If she wanted to throw things, let her. I deserved every bit of it. But it got worse. The nights became unbearable. I would wake up at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy, wet breathing right next to my ear. Not the soft breath of a sleeping partner, but a raspy, guttural sound. When I reached for the lamp, the bulb would pop with a deafening crack, plunging me back into darkness. Shadows began to pool in the corners of the room, taller and darker than they should have been. They seemed to stretch toward the bed. I stopped sleeping. I became a ghost of myself, dark circles under my eyes, shaking through my shifts at work. The culmination happened on a Tuesday in November. It was a month after the accident. I was lying in bed, fully dressed, because I was too terrified to change into pajamas anymore. I was staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sun to rise. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Then, the temperature dropped. It wasn't gradual, it was instant. The air went freezing cold. So sharp it hurt my nose to inhale. I squeezed my eyes shut. "I'm sorry, Marianne." I whispered my mantra of guilt. Something grabbed my ankles. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a vice grip, strong and painful, like 2 bands of steel clamping down on my bones. I gasped, my eyes flying open. I tried to kick, but my legs wouldn't move. With a violent jerk, I was ripped down the mattress. I screamed. I clawed at the sheets, desperate for purchase, but the fabric just bunched in my hands. I was dragged off the foot of the bed, my hips slamming hard onto the hardwood floor. The grip didn't let go. I was being pulled across the floor of the bedroom toward the open closet door. The closet was a gaping maw of darkness. "Marianne, stop, please." I shrieked. I grabbed the leg of the heavy oak dresser. As I slid past, the friction burned my palms, but I held on. The force pulling my legs was immense, threatening to dislocate my hips. I was sobbing, hysterical, kicking wildly with my feet against empty air. Suddenly, the grip vanished. I didn't wait. I scrambled into the corner of the room, and curled into a ball, hyperventilating. I stayed there until dawn broke, watching the closet, waiting for her to come back and finish me. I looked at my ankles in the morning light. There were bruises, distinct finger-shaped bruises, but they weren't the size of Marianne's hands. Marianne had small, delicate hands. These marks were large. The fingers were too long. A cold realization settled in my gut. That wasn't Marianne. Marianne had a temper. Yes, she could be fiery, but she was never cruel. She would never hurt me physically. She loved me, even in our worst moments. She loved me. Whatever was in my apartment, whatever was dragging me toward the dark, wasn't the woman I loved. It was something else, something that fed on misery. And I was an all-you-can-eat buffet. I was terrified to go back to the apartment, but I had nowhere else to go. I spent the day walking around the city, freezing in the November wind, dreading the sunset. That evening, as I approached the front steps of my building, I saw something sitting near the communal trash cans. It was a cat. It wasn't scrounging for food, and it wasn't fleeing from the noise of the street. It was sitting perfectly still, its tail wrapped neatly around its paws, watching me. It was a calico, mostly white with patches of orange and black. I stopped at the bottom of the stairs. The cat stood up and let out a soft MRRP sound. It walked right up to me, winding through my legs, rubbing its cheek against my shins. I reached down automatically to pet it. The fur was soft, surprisingly clean for a stray. Then, the cat looked up at me. The breath caught in my throat. The eyes, they were blue, not the greenish-yellow or amber typical cats. They were a deep, striking, impossible electric blue. They were her eyes. I fell to my knees on the sidewalk, ignoring the cold concrete. I stared at the cat, and the cat stared back with an intelligence that felt jarring. It bumped its forehead against my nose, purring, a sound like a small engine. "Hey!" I whispered, my voice trembling. The cat didn't run away. When I stood up and unlocked the front door of the building, the cat trotted inside ahead of me as if it owned the place. I hesitated, then followed. It climbed the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment door and sat there, waiting for me to turn the key. I opened the door. Usually, the dread would hit me the moment I crossed the threshold. The heavy, malicious atmosphere. The cat walked in first. It strutted into the center of the living room, sat down, and let out a long, low hiss. It wasn't hissing at me. It was staring at the dark hallway, leading to the bedroom. The fur along its spine stood up in a rigid ridge. I stood by the door, paralyzed. The cat held its ground. It let out a growl that sounded too deep for its small body. Then it strode forward into the hallway, into the bedroom. I heard a thump like something heavy falling, and then silence. The cat came trotting back out a moment later, its tail held high, looking relaxed. It walked over to the couch, Marianne's favorite spot, jumped up, curled into a ball, and went to sleep. For the first time in a month, the apartment felt empty, but in a good way. The heavy pressure was gone. I didn't kick the cat out. I named her Marianne. It felt sacrilegious to anyone else, I'm sure, but it felt like the only option to me. Things changed after Mary and the cat moved in. The supernatural activity didn't stop immediately, but it changed. It felt like a war was being waged, but I was no longer the soldier. I was a civilian being protected. One night, I was watching TV. The air grew cold again, the familiar scent of ozone, and rot began to creep in. I tensed up, clutching a pillow. Marianne, who had been dozing on my lap, instantly woke up. She leaped off the couch and stood in the center of the room. She stared at an empty corner near the ceiling, her ears pinned back flat against her skull. She let out a scream, that specific, yowling caterwaul that cats make when they are about to fight. The lights flickered. The TV turned itself off. Marianne launched herself at the wall. She literally ran halfway up the drywall, claws out, swiping at the empty air. I saw, and I swear this is true, a dark, misty-shaped recoil from her. She landed on her feet and hissed again, spitting, her blue eyes blazing. The cold air dissipated instantly. The TV flickered back on. Marianne sat down, licked her paw, and looked at me as if to say, "It's handled." This happened a few more times over the next month. Whatever that thing was, whatever dark parasite had latched onto my grief, it was trying to come back. And every time Marianne was there, she was a sentinel. She slept on the pillow next to my head every single night. If I shifted in a nightmare, she would place a paw on my cheek, grounding me. I started to notice things about her behavior, things that made the hairs on my arms stand up. My human girlfriend, Marianne, had a very specific hate for olives. If a pizza came with olives, she would pick them off with surgical precision and stack them in a pyramid on a napkin. One night, I ordered supreme pizza. I was eating at the coffee table. The cat jumped up. She sniffed a slice. She delicately used her claw to hook an olive, fling it off the pizza onto the table, and then nudged it away with her nose. She did this to every olive on the slice before trying to steal a piece of the pepperoni. I just stared at her. "Really?" I asked. She blinked slowly. Marianne, the human, also had a habit of tapping her fingers when she was impatient. The cat, when waiting for me to fill the food bowl, would tap her left paw rhythmically against the floor tiles. Tap, tap, tap. She didn't like cat toys. I bought feathers, laser pointers, fake mice. She looked at them with disdain, but she loved watching reality TV. She would sit on the back of the couch, eyes glued to the screen, head moving back and forth as the people argued. Human Marion used to say it was her trashy, guilty pleasure. Slowly, the fear in my life evaporated. The dark entity gave up. It couldn't get past the guard dog, or rather, the guard cat. By the time spring arrived, the apartment was just an apartment again, but I was never alone. I talked to her. I know that's what crazy cat ladies do, but this was different. I told her about my day. I told her I was sorry about the fight. I told her I loved her. Whenever I apologized for the accident, for the argument, she would butt her head against my mouth to silence me. She would purr so loudly it rattled her ribs. It was forgiveness. I knew it. Life went on. I moved out of that apartment 2 years later. Marianne came with me, obviously. I went back to school. I got a degree. I started a career in graphic design. I dated a few people, though it never really worked out. It's hard to bring someone home when you feel like your dead ex is judging them from the top of the cat tree. And that brings us to today. I was sitting on my porch this morning, drinking coffee. Marianne was sunning herself on the railing. I realized the date, October 14th. It has been exactly 15 years since the accident. It has been 15 years minus 3 weeks since I found the cat. I looked at her. 15 years is a long time for a cat. A cat at 15 is usually slowing down. They have gray hairs around their muzzle. Their eyes get cloudy with cataracts. They sleep 20 hours a day. They have trouble jumping onto high surfaces. Marianne looks exactly the same as the day I found her. I mean exactly. Her fur is pristine, silky, and vibrant. There's not a single white hair on her black and orange patches. Her eyes are that same crystal, piercing electric blue, clear as a summer sky. She jumped from the porch railing to the roof of the garage this morning, a 6-foot vertical leap, to chase a squirrel. She moves with the agility of a kitten. She eats with the appetite of a lion. I took her to the vet last week for a checkup. The vet, a new guy, looked at her chart. Born roughly 15 years ago, he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said. "I found her then." He examined her. He checked her teeth, her heart, her joints. He looked perplexed. He took an x-ray just to check for arthritis. "This is bizarre," he told me, showing me the scan, her bone density, her teeth. "If you didn't tell me she was 15, I'd say this cat is maybe 2 years old. Maximum. There's zero sign of aging. Absolutely none." I nodded. I wasn't surprised. I came home and looked at old photos. I found a picture of human Marianne from her 20th birthday. She's laughing, looking at the camera. The look in her eyes is defiance and joy mixed together. Then I looked at the cat, sitting on my desk, watching me write this. I don't think she's a cat. I mean, she is a cat biologically, I suppose. But the spirit inside, the thing looking out through those blue eyes, The entity that attacked me 15 years ago wanted to hurt me. It was drawn to my guilt. But Marianne, she fought it off. She came back. She found a vessel that would let her stay. I've read about this kind of thing. Reincarnation, possession, spiritual attachment. Usually, spirits move on. They fade. Or, if they stay in an animal, the animal eventually ages and dies. But she isn't aging. She isn't leaving. I stroked her head a few minutes ago, running my thumb over her ears. I whispered, "You're not going anywhere, are you?" She let out a short, sharp meow. It sounded like no. She bit my thumb gently. Another thing human Marion used to do when she was being playful, and began to lick my hand with her sandpaper tongue. I'm not scared. I should be. Probably. It defies every law of nature. I'm living with a creature that is effectively immortal, inhabited by my dead girlfriend, who refuses to cross over because she thinks I can't handle myself alone. And the honest truth? She's probably right. She's looking at me right now. She wants me to stop typing. She's tapping her left paw on the desk. Tap, tap, tap. I guess I better go. She hates to be ignored. Story 4. I had ventured into a massive cave. I got more than what I bargained for. I have always been the adventuring type. Loved hiking and cave exploration ever since I was old enough to do so, and I've done some pretty difficult and physically challenging things. I always thought that exploration was the best way to find the world's secrets, and that every nook and cranny could have something important. But today, I learned why some places shouldn't be explored. I was planning out my next cave trip, looking around on Google Maps, when I noticed a strange cave in northern Russia that caught my interest. It had almost no detail about it on Google Maps, besides the fact its interior was very large. Its entrance was in Mount Pobeda, and presumably it was deep. It piqued my interest, so I booked a flight to the nearest city to Mount Pobeda, and planned to go there ASAP. Once I got there, I went to the park around the mountain, searching for the cave. I found it hidden on the opposite side of the park, its tiny entrance placed as if it didn't want to be found. That's when I began to delve into it. I had packed about 2 weeks worth of food and water, winter clothes, and an extremely long rope that I would use to find my way back to the entrance. The cave was wondrous. Enormous stalactites and stalagmites hung from the ceiling, and many formed large pillars. Ice had covered a lot of the entrance, but there was almost none going deeper in. I looked in awe at the sheer scale, until I noticed something. A footstep not my own. It was faint and barely noticeable, but in the echoing caverns, I heard it. But I decided to press on, despite knowing I may be followed by someone. As I went deeper and deeper, I noticed strange blue stone, which looked nothing like I had ever seen before. I decided to stop for a second. That's when I heard another distinct footstep. The thing was still following me. I decided to press further, despite the interesting stone. As I walked deeper and deeper, winding the rope further and further, I came across something that made my heart skip a beat. Greenery. This was something I didn't think could be possible all the way down here. How? This part of the cave is at least 1,000 feet underground. There's no sunlight, and the stone has no nutrients. But still, I decided to keep going, occasionally eating a bit of something while walking. As I kept going further, more and more greenery kept showing up, until I reached an opening into a large cavern. I walked into it, and suddenly my face was flooded with light. It was an enormous garden. This shouldn't be possible, but it was there, right in front of me. Massive trees towering towards the ceiling, which somehow shone with a brilliant light. A large pit of water sat in the middle, and a long corridor with no lights was in front of me. I walked forward, admiring the beauty of the garden, the intricacy of the carved stone walls. But I knew I had to keep going, so the thing wouldn't catch up. Walking down the halls, I decided to make a makeshift torch so I could see. Strangely, as I went forward, there were crossroads that I had to take. I went left multiple times, the intricate stone disappearing slowly into blackness. It was as if I was standing on darkness itself. As I walked forward, A massive pair of gilded gates appeared before me, cracked open, my curiosity overriding any sense of self-preservation. I walked toward the door and peeked into it, torch shining brightly. I could barely comprehend what I actually saw before my head exploded. Well, at least that was what it felt like. An incomprehensible amount of information flooded my head. Knowledge of things that had died millions of years ago. The names and lives of every soul to ever live. The creation and destruction of a star, and so much more. I dropped my torch at whatever that thing was feet and just ran. I couldn't comprehend anything in front of me anymore, and my head swarmed with too much information. I ran and ran until I saw the true sun, not whatever that ceiling was. I was not ever going to go there again. My head still overflowing with information. I realized I could not let anyone suffer what I had just gone through at Esso before I left that godforsaken place. I boarded up the small entrance of the cave and wrote a warning. Whatever you do, do not enter this cave. There is something here that should never be seen. I barely made it back to my hotel in one piece. Fortunately, my brain was starting to clear some of the many things that had been forced into my head. Story 5. I went urban exploring with my friend. We found a stairwell that shouldn't exist. I'm not looking for advice or sympathy. I just want to know if it sounds like something a person's brain can go through and still work afterward. I already did the boring rational checklist. Gas leak, mold, not enough sleep, too much stress, memory screw-ups. I actually wrote them all out in the Notes app and tried to make each one fit. None of them explain what I remember. None of them explain what's missing now. I remember what I saw. I remember what I heard. And I remember a person who was right next to me for hours. You can say I'm misreading it. Fine. Just don't tell me it was all in my head. It started with a screenshot. My friend Liam dropped it in our group chat around 2 in the morning. It was low res, all blocky pixels. Concrete hallway. Green paint on the walls. Doors down both sides. The doors didn't have handles. Above each one, there was a black number stenciled onto the wall. Under the screenshot, someone had written, South Annex, Building D. Stairs go down 3 more floors and the blueprints say, do not go past the second landing. You'll know why. The username in the screenshot was blurred out. The image came from some dead Urbex forum. When I tried to find the original thread, every link I clicked led to a broken archive page or scraped copy missing half the posts. I never found where that caption was first posted. This is exactly Liam's thing. He spends weekends in abandoned hospitals and parking structures and service tunnels. If a place is empty, off limits, and smells old, he wants to walk around in it. I'm usually the one warning him about trespassing and rotten floors and security cameras. That night, I didn't say no. I told myself it was because the place was close, about a 45-minute drive from town, just off the highway, near an industrial park that never filled properly. Most of the buildings out there turned into storage or stayed for lease until the banners faded. Liam did his usual digging beforehand. Used to be a research lab, he said in the car. He was in the passenger seat scrolling. I was driving. Spin off from a defense contractor. Closed sometime in the 80s. Official paperwork says materials testing. Old posts say human factors. Sleep trials, sensory stuff, that kind of thing. I kept my attention on the road. Old postware. Forum nobody moderates anymore, he said. Half the threads are bots. Screenshots look like they were taken on a potato. That's how you know it's good. He sounded relaxed. Too relaxed, honestly. The sky was just a flat gray slab that day when we pulled into the industrial park. The whole place felt wrong in a way I didn't have a neat word for. Big rectangles of concrete and brick, Too many parking spaces, not enough people or vehicles. It looked like the tail end of a half-built future. Building D didn't have a nameplate, just a 2-story brick block with dark windows, and a sagging chain-link fence around the front. A rusted padlock hung on the gate. The link right next to it had been cut, and somebody had looped the loose chain back through the lock. So it looked sealed at a glance. Liam saw that and smiled. When he looked over and saw my face, the smile faded a little. "We can still bail," he said. "Walk the outside, peek in, get food. No big deal. Let's at least see the first floor." I heard myself say. That answer didn't match how I actually felt. Inside, the air felt dead. No draft, no movement. Dust lay on every surface. The lobby looked like generic late 70s office space. Square tan tiles, glass doors and metal frames, a long front desk with an old CRT monitor sitting dark on top. There was a black spray-painted smiley face on one wall. Nothing else. No tags. We went through a door behind the front desk and stepped into a corridor. Most of the rooms offered had been stripped. Ceiling grids open, tiles missing, wires hanging down. The carpet was stained in big, irregular patches. A couple of those stains still had darker edges that looked too fresh for a place that had been empty for decades. "Do you smell that?" Liam asked. Under the dust, there was a sharp metallic scent and something chemical that didn't match mildew or old building smell. "This is probably where they did the tests," he said, leaning into a room that had a one-way mirror built into the far wall. Observers on one side, subjects on the other. "Great," I said. "So, South Annex?" He checked his phone again. "If the blueprint I found is right, the annex should be that way." He pointed deeper into the building. We kept going. Some of the doors had room numbers stenciled above the frame. 112, 114, 116, then a jump to 120, then 126, then one door with no number at all. The next one after that had 118, which didn't line up with the sequence at all. I decided they must have remodeled the floor at some point and changed the layout without updating everything. At the end of the corridor was a plain metal door with an exit sign above it. The plastic on the sign was faded. The light inside it was off. Liam pushed the door open. The hallway from the screenshot was on the other side. Concrete floor with a narrow strip of warm material down the center. Green painted walls. Doors on both sides spaced exactly the same distance apart. Above each door, a black number. All of them were 0. First door, 0. Second door, 0. Third door, 0. Our footsteps landed on the floor and stopped. "No echo." "This is it," I said. Liam stepped up close to one of the zeros. "They painted over the real numbers," he said. "Look close." He was right. Up close, you could see faint outlines under the zeros. Shapes like 101, 103, 105, just a little off-center. The new black zeros sat on top of them. At the far end of the hallway, another exit sign glowed red. "There's no power in this building," I said. We didn't see any other lights on. "Emergency line," he said. "Separate wiring, or some old battery that should have been dead years ago and isn't." His voice didn't carry the way it should have. It seemed to just stop a few feet away. Halfway down the hall, I noticed I was breathing harder. The air felt heavier in my chest. Not warmer, just dense. We stopped at one of the doors with 0 above it. No handle, no lock, no hinges on our side. Just a door with a narrow vertical slot at eye level. Liam bent forward to look through the slot. "Don't," I said. He stayed there. "It's just black," he said. "Can't see anything." He turned on his phone flashlight and angled the beam at the slot. The light hit the opening and didn't go anywhere beyond it. No reflection, no faint surface, nothing. Just a beam cutting off. Liam's face tightened. "Yeah, that's not how this should work," he muttered. A sound came from further down the hall. Something dragging. Dry. Slow. We both froze. "Probably a raccoon," he said. It didn't sound like he believed it. The sound came again. Same volume, same distance. There was no echo, no way to tell direction. The hallway might as well have absorbed it in place. "Let's just find the stairs," I said. We see them, then we leave. That's it. He hesitated, then nodded once. Okay, stairs, then gone. We moved on. The exit sign at the end of the hallway didn't seem to get closer. My body said we were walking. My eyes said we were staying in the same spot. I checked my watch. We walked for about a minute, and the sign looked exactly the same. Wait, I said. This. The exit sign flicked off. When it came back on, it was right above the door in front of us. We hadn't crossed that distance. Liam let out a short, shaky laugh. All right, he said. That's something. Old construction messing with perspective. That dragging noise came again. One drawn-out pull, and then a single, clear tap on the floor. I'm done, I said. Stairs, then out. I mean it this time. He opened the door. The stairwell looked ordinary at first glance. Square landings, concrete steps, metal railings. Black stenciled numbers on the walls at each landing. The level we were on had a 1. One flight down was marked 0. Another flight down was marked -1. The first minus one we saw had a line scratched through it, like someone had dug a key or a nail across it. There were no stairs going higher than 1. No roof door. You read the caption, Liam said. Stairs go lower than they should. Don't go past the second landing. That's the warning. He put his hand on the rail. Second landing and we're out, he said. For real. I just want to see how far it goes. You always say that, I said. Yeah, and sometimes I mean it, he said. We started down. The air grew colder with each flight. By the time we reached the landing with 0, my fingers were numb on the rail. There was a door there. Metal, blank, no window. Leave it alone, I said. He did, which surprised me. One more, he said. We hit -1. Confirm the pattern, then we're done. The next landing down had -1 on the wall again. This stencil didn't have a scratch through it. The door here had a black 0 above it, just like the hallway doors. We saw it, I said. That's the second landing. Your little rule is met. Time to go back up. The stairwell lights shut off. It wasn't dramatic. No popping glass. Just a tiny electrical noise. And then only our flashlights. His phone beam and my headlamp made 2 small islands of light. Beyond those, nothing. Tell me that was a timer. I said, please say there's some stupid motion sensor. That wasn't me, he said, and I believe him. Something moved below us. Not footsteps. Not any animal noise I recognized. It was a slow, steady shift, like a heavy coil of something being rearranged. Liam aimed his light downward. We didn't see the familiar pattern of stairs fading into a darker distance. The light hit a gray space that refused to show depth or shape. My eyes started to sting again. We're going now, I said. Up. He nodded. We climbed. We went up 1 full flight. The landing number said -1. He stopped. No, he said. That's not right. We started at 1. I said, then 0, then -1. We came down to this one. We just went up 1. This should be 0. It's not. As we looked at it, the number changed. The paint didn't smear. The wall didn't shift. It was the same marks. My brain just suddenly read them as -1 again instead of 0. No transition. Just a new fact. Liam's breathing went uneven. We misread it before, he said quickly. It's fine. We're just panicking. That's all. He climbed 3 more steps. There was no landing up there. The stairs continued in the same downward direction in front of him. When he turned and looked behind, those also went down. The landing we thought we were leaving didn't exist on either side. He stared at me. Stop moving, I said. Stay right where you are. We stood in that same section of stairwell for several seconds. A new sound started. Short, hard taps. Not random. In groups. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap. Longer pause. Tap, tap. It took me a few cycles to notice it matched my breathing. Every time I inhaled, there was a quick cluster. When I held my breath, it stopped. When I exhaled, it picked back up a moment later. Do you hear that? I asked. Liam didn't answer. He was staring at the wall where the -1 was painted. New marks had appeared above the number, thin vertical strokes grouped together. Tallies, 2 groups, a narrow gap under the second group, where one more line could have fit. He reached out and pressed his fingers against the blank space under that gap. Gray dust stuck to his skin. Stop touching it. I snapped. Seriously, don't do that. It's a count, he said. There's one missing. He wiped his fingers on his shirt. The gray didn't fully rub off. You could still see it on his skin. I needed something that was ours, something I could verify. I pulled a black Sharp out of my pocket, same one I'd used that morning for paperwork. I went to the nearest clear bit of wall and drew a thick arrow pointing toward the direction I still believed was up. If we see this again, we'll know we looped, I said. No more guessing. No more trusting our sense of direction. If we pass this arrow twice, we stop and figure it out. He gave me a small, tight nod. We started climbing again. I kept my hand on the rail the whole time. The tapping kept matching our breathing. It didn't grow louder or softer, just adjusted as we did. We passed another landing. The stencil here read -2. My thighs burned. My chest hurt. The air stayed thin and cold. The arrow never reappeared. After several more flights, my legs started to shake so badly I couldn't trust my footing. I need a second, I said. Just 1 second. Liam stopped above me. The wall at this landing had changed again. The tallies above the number now had no gap. The missing line was there. There, he said quietly. Now it's all there. His voice broke on the last word. All what? I asked. He looked down at me like he was trying to line up my face with something in his head. Ever feel like a place is keeping track of you? He asked. Not just visitors. You, personally. I didn't answer. The tapping stopped. Silence in that stairwell wasn't clean. Under it, a slow, steady rasp came in. It sounded like air being moved through a long, narrow space. It didn't come from above or below. It came from the walls. My teeth hurt. My fingers cramped around the rail. My body moved before I finished thinking about it. I grabbed his wrist again and ran. I honestly couldn't tell you which way we went. Up, down, sideways, none of it meant anything. My feet kept hitting concrete. Landings flashed past. -3. Blank. Another -1. A 0 in the wrong place. Numbers that didn't connect to each other. The rasping noise stayed at the same volume the whole time, no matter how fast or slow we moved. At one landing, my heels sank just enough into the surface to feel it. The concrete gave under my weight briefly, and then firmed again. The wall beside us pushed inward once, then relaxed. Don't stop, I said. Just keep going. We didn't. Eventually, a different kind of light showed up above us. Pale, gray daylight seeped through a doorway at the top of yet another run. Not the harsh stairwell bulbs. Real outside light. There, I said. That has to be the way out. We sprinted. One last landing with no number. A door hanging open. A short corridor. Broken safety glass in window frames. Grass and cracked asphalt beyond. We went through and out. The outside air hit hard. Real wind, real street noise, real world. My knees gave out, and I ended up on the pavement. Leaning on my hands, breathing like I just finished a sprint. For a while there was only that. Our breathing. Distant cars. Wind. Then I realized I only heard myself. I turned. Liam was still standing in the doorway. He was halfway in shadow, one hand braced on frame, the other hanging at his side. His body faced me. His feet were still partly on the indoor flooring. Come on, I said. We're out. Get over here. He tilted his head a few degrees. Slow, controlled. His fingers flexed once and then went still again. The hair on my arm stood up. Liam, I said. He stepped out. His body moved the way a body is supposed to move, but the timing was off. His joint seemed to catch and then continue. No casual shift of weight. No little adjustments you don't usually notice. Every step was deliberate. He stopped in front of me. Up close, his face looked washed out, pupils wide. His eyes were locked on mine and didn't flick around to anything else. Then he smiled. His smile has always been a little crooked on one side. This one wasn't. Both corners of his mouth went up the same amount. I felt my stomach drop. "You okay?" I asked. The words came out too loud. He blinked once. The blink lasted a fraction longer than normal. "We made it out," he said. The words were right. The pronunciation was right. The space in between the words was just slightly wrong, like he was repeating a line he practiced. Behind him, the stairwell door swung toward the frame on its own. It didn't latch. It just moved until it almost touched and then stopped. Near the hem of his shirt, I saw a tiny strip of white. It sat flush under the fabric. Not lint, not dust. A thin band pressed against the skin, the way a hospital wristband hides, under sleeve. Without thinking, I reached toward it. He jerked back so fast it didn't look natural. "Don't," he said. That single word sounded completely normal. We stood there, just looking at each other. "Okay," I said finally. "I won't. Let's just go home." On the way back, he didn't touch his phone. No music, no scrolling, no complaining about my driving. He stared out the passenger window the whole ride. At one red light, I glanced down at his hands. The same faint gray dust clung around his fingers. It hadn't rubbed off. When we pulled up outside his building, he turned toward me. "You should delete the photos," he said. "We didn't take any," I said. He looked at me for a second, then nodded slowly. "Right," he said. "Good." He got out and went inside. I stayed in the car for a while with my hands still on the steering wheel and the engine off, just staring at the windshield. It felt like a scene was missing somewhere between the stairwell and dropping him off. When I finally went inside my own place, I locked the door, checked the deadbolt twice, then took a shower until the hot water ran out. I still couldn't shake the feeling of the stairwell air sitting in my lungs. I didn't sleep that night. The second night, I lay in bed with the lights on, watching the ceiling. By the third night, I gave in and tried to call him. The call didn't ring. An automated voice said the number wasn't in service. I texted him anyway. The message failed instantly. I opened our group chat. All the old messages were still there. The memes, the photos, the plans, everything. At the top, where his name should have been, there was just a gray unknown. No profile picture. No contact info. I checked my phone's contact list. There was an entry sitting there with no name and no number. Every time I tried to edit it, the app spun and then flipped me back to the list. I checked social media. No profile. No posts. No old photos. Comments people had clearly written to him were still there, but now they looked like one-sided arguments with nobody. I called our friend Jenna. "Hey," I said. "Stupid question. When's the last time you talked to Liam?" "Who?" she asked. "Liam," I said. "Tall, dark hair. He came with us to that flea market in July. You bought that ugly lamp? He kept roasting you for it." "I went with you," she said slowly. There wasn't a third person. I hung up. I know exactly how that sounds reading it back. I sat on the couch staring at my phone, trying to rearrange names and faces in my head. Nothing lined up. Then I heard something at my front door. A soft scrape across the floor, like something thin sliding under the gap. No knock. No footsteps. I watched the bottom of the door for a while, then forced myself to get up. The hallway outside was empty. No one at the elevator. No doors closing. Just the usual building hum. On the floor inside my door was a narrow strip of plastic. It was the size of an old label. The surface was off-white and a little glossy. The edges curled up slightly. One side felt faintly sticky, as if it had already gone on and off a few things. I picked it up. One side had tallies on it, drawn in neat, thin black lines. 5 lines, a small gap, 5 more, and so on. At the end of the last group, the ink had dragged a little. Underneath the tallies, in very small block letters, was a name, Liam. The lines of the letters were clean, with a bit of bleed into the plastic. I turned it over. The other side had a symbol, 3 short horizontal lines stacked with equal spacing. A single vertical line went straight down through all 3. The ink was dark and solid. It didn't match any logo or alphabet I recognized, but it looked deliberate. Staring at it gave me the same pressure in my head I'd felt in the stairwell. when the numbers shifted meaning. Below the symbol, the rest of the space was crowded with very small marks, too tight to make out clearly. My eyes kept trying to turn them into letters and failing. At the bottom, in a less steady hand, was a short sentence you were supposed to see. The T into had a faint extra line starting in the wrong direction. My hand shook enough that I almost dropped the strip. I opened the door again. The hallway was still empty. I shut the door, locked it, then locked it again, even though I knew that didn't do anything extra. I sat down with my back against it and put the label on the coffee table where I could see it. I know the normal checklist of what I'm supposed to do. Burn it, throw it away, call the cops and sound insane, book a therapist, ask a doctor if I'm having a break with reality, hand the label to someone else, and see if they feel anything staring at it. I haven't done any of that. The label is in the top drawer of my nightstand. Every time I think about taking it out and getting rid of it, I hear that old tapping pattern in my head, matching my breathing, and I close the drawer again. I haven't gone back to Building D. I pulled it up on satellite imagery instead. The industrial park is there. The footprint of Building D is there. The section where the south annex should be is just a little smeared on every set of images, like the file glitched. One afternoon I got in the car and started driving toward the highway exit that would take me there. As I approached it, my hands locked on the wheel. My chest tightened. I couldn't move my foot to hit the turn signal. I took the next exit to a gas station, parked, and sat there until it was dark, then drove home using a different route. I think about the tallies on that stairwell wall all the time. 2 groups, a gap, 1 missing. Later, no gap, everything filled. Whatever that place is, it was tracking something. It knew there was an empty line. It let me walk out anyway. I don't know why. Maybe it needed someone to remember its layout. Maybe this is how it stays open, by sitting in the back of someone's mind and then getting written down like this. Maybe the label is just its way of marking that I still belong on that count. I'm not writing this because I think it's a cool story. I'm writing it because I can't stop counting now. Breaths, steps in the hallway, heater clicks, the little green flash from the router. Whenever anything repeats, my brain tracks automatically. I keep waiting for something external to line up perfectly with it. Sometimes around 3 in the morning, I wake up with my hand clenched like I'm holding a cold rail. My arm muscles feel tired. My lungs feel like they've been working harder than they should for someone lying still. For a few seconds, my bedroom feels thin, and the memory of those stairs feels solid. On nights when the building is quiet and there's no traffic outside and the heater stops, I hear something else in the background of my thoughts. Not tapping, not scraping, just a calm, steady sense of something keeping count, floor by floor, and never running out of numbers to say. Story 6. I'm an ER doctor. Panic attacks aren't what you think they are. Sometimes, people really do die for no reason. And I don't mean a senseless killing or a tragic accident. I mean that sometimes the human body shuts down for reasons beyond our current medical knowledge. We know that it starts either in the heart or the autonomic nervous system. But beyond that, we in the medical field are stumped. I'm an emergency physician working in a major city, and I'd like to break the silence on this issue, but that would be career suicide, so I'll do it anonymously here. It happens more than you might think. A young, healthy woman goes to sleep and just doesn't wake up the next day. A middle-aged man collapses on the sidewalk, and we always come up with an excuse of how it happened. The woman's doctor will dig into her medical history and find out she admitted to doing cocaine at a party in college. Or the middle-aged man's grandfather died of a heart attack, so he probably had a congenital defect that led to sudden cardiac death. The problem is a heart attack and sudden cardiac death are 2 different things. An overweight 80-year-old smoker having a heart attack does explain why his 45-year-old half-marathon running grandson's heart simply stopped beating one day on his way to the corner store. It's so much easier to explain away the problem if they have a current medical condition. Oh, he has diabetes. That's why his heart stopped. Never mind that his diabetes was well managed, and he followed his medication regimen religiously. Oh, she had the flu, which we often forget kills people every year. Yeah, it does, but not normally 17-year-old varsity volleyball players with no underlying health problems. Sometimes the sudden death occurs and causes an accident, which makes covering up the real cause easier. Heck, we don't even need to cover it up, since half the time we don't know about it. I remember learning about the condition back in med school during my pathology rotation. I was naturally pretty good at the subfield and considered specializing in it for a time before going the emergency medicine route. The attending took a liking to me and asked me to take a look at something. I'd like to say I was in the more doing extra credit because I was such a badass student. But honestly, if memory serves, I was practicing rectal exams on my cadaver because I hated them and I didn't want to freak out in front of class again. I found the pathologist in the adjacent room, looking at the nude corpse of a 38-year-old woman with a Y incision across her torso. She had bruises and lacerations across her face from an airbag. No damage to her hands or wrists though, which sometimes happens when airbags deploy, but isn't consistent enough to be suspicious alone. She also had a bruise stretching from left shoulder across her chest, a common injury caused by seatbelts. And I was told the autopsy revealed her spleen had been contused, again, something consistent with seatbelt-related injuries. The only problem was that was the only internal damage the doctor could find. Her lungs, heart, and brain showed no significant pathology. She hadn't bled out internally. Analysis of her blood showed elevated levels of troponin, a marker often used to diagnose heart attacks, but no infarcts were found in her heart. Witnesses said that she went limp before a car swerved off the road. Perhaps she fainted, you might think. Just because she lost consciousness before crashing doesn't mean thousands of people are dropping dead every year from an unknown cause. After all, her autopsy also revealed she had a blood alcohol concentration of 0.03%. So that probably contributed to her loss of consciousness, right? Now, you're thinking like a doctor. Why consider the facts when you can neatly file this away with the many alcohol-related accidents that occur every year? A back of 0.03%? What a joke. That's well under the legal limit, as I'm sure you know. And with no other drugs or even prescribed medications in her system, the likelihood that the amount of alcohol found in a small beer knocked this woman out is absurd to me. She had a history of enjoying a few drinks each week. So it's not like this was her first time. But her friends and family said she had been under a lot of stress lately and wasn't sleeping well. So the hospital was able to latch onto that as an explanation. A little bit of beer plus a whole lot of stress and poor sleep. That can make someone lose consciousness at the wheel, right? If that were the case, everyone I went to med school with would be dead 100 times over. Heck, not just med students. The whole damn country is experiencing an epidemic of stress and poor sleep. But it's more comforting to believe this explanation than the alternative. Let's ignore, of course, the fact her body didn't have enough damage to account for her death. I noticed a Frankenstein cut across the woman's scalp that meant the pathologist had examined her brain, and I asked if there was any damage to it. He said there wasn't and asked me what I thought he should do. I told him to re-examine the brain for any neurological reasons the woman might have suddenly fainted. He said he wouldn't. When I asked why, he replied, "Because if I don't find anything, it draws attention to the fact that she died of nothing. Leave just enough ambiguity, and the family can make peace with it." Those words stuck with me. You've heard about this unnamed, unspoken condition before too. When it happens to celebrities, it makes the news. Thankfully, the media love dragging famous people's names to the mud. So when they die of nothing, you hear about every unhealthy habit they ever had and every drug they ever took. The cause of death is always some horrible celebrity behavior that us normal people don't engage in, so we don't have to worry. And it cracks me up when the media outlets all pick different explanations to run with. Remember that TV star we all watched growing up who died a few years back? He had engaged in some rigorous physical activity beforehand, so that must have contributed to his heart failure. Except People with weak hearts usually don't do rigorous activities. They follow a pretty clear and predictable decline in physical ability before dying. And people who get heart attacks usually get them during the activity, not after. Oh, it can happen, but generally speaking, if a bit of plaque is going to break off and block an artery, it's going to do it when your heart rate spikes sharply, not when it's coming down. I also heard it was the activity combined with overheating from his hot tub. Or no, it was that he actually passed out first and then drowned. No, wait, it was everyone's favorite culprit, drugs. And the reality is, no one knows how he died. A martial arts star known for his extreme physical fitness gets rushed to the hospital with what they said was swelling in the brain. But I've also heard he died of an allergic reaction to a headache medication or water toxicity due to the liquid diet he was on. Heck, I even heard he died because he ate hashish, which is a concentrated form of marijuana that has been linked to 0 deaths. Or 1, I suppose, if you believe it killed this guy. What we do know about the condition is that it often causes a sense of dread before setting in. Full-blown panic attacks are seen in roughly 50% of cases. And before you comment about how panic attacks can't kill you, let me ask you this. How do you know? How do you know a heart attack isn't just a panic attack that kills you? Their symptoms are often the same. Maybe an aneurysm is what happens when a panic raises your blood pressure so high it compromises the lining of the blood vessels in your brain. Remember that pop star from like 15 years back? He died because his doctor wouldn't say no to him and kept giving him drugs. And then the doctor got in trouble. But what were the drugs he was taking? It was something to help him sleep because he suffered from terrible fits of anxiety. So, did the drugs really kill him? This is the hardest pill to swallow. This is the reason not just the medical community, but the world at large has agreed to this cooperative lie. Your anxiety is right. You can just die for no reason. It's not a conspiracy. It's not something us doctors cooked up to control the masses. Everyone knows it on some level. We all know life is fragile and random. And we all know that those sudden bouts of dizziness and tightness in the chest and feelings of dread can't just be benign. They're warning us of something biological that we don't yet understand. Why, in the name of God, would we evolve to experience panic for no reason? But there's a reason. Chronic anxiety. Do you really believe that? Do you really believe that the fix evolution gave us dealing with stress over long periods is to imitate a heart attack instead of, I don't know, maybe making us better at handling stress? But my doctor said, exactly your doctor said. And I'm here to tell you that your doctor is either wrong or lying to you. It's not out of malicious intent. It's to help people live their lives normally without a constant fear looming over them while we research this issue and try to understand it better and hopefully find a treatment for it. I was one of the doctors that was wrong. I believed the lie myself. Or I pushed the truth down somewhere inside me, choosing not to fully understand what the pathologist had tried to teach me in medical school. This has been mostly an essay so far, so let me try my hand at a bit of narrative to show you exactly what broke the spell for me, what woke me up from the illusion, so to speak. Abby was a 26-year-old female. She was admitted in my hospital's emergency department at 1:30 a.m. reporting shortness of breath, chills, shaking, and tachycardia. Since any symptoms that can be heart-related are assumed to be so until proven otherwise, she was sent back to me right away. Her heart rate was 128. Not great for sitting down, but to be honest, that's roughly what you'd experience on a light jog. Blood pressure was 145/90. Not great, but working in an ER, I'd seen much worse on people who walked out the next day. So, tell me what you do for work, I said, as I applied the electrodes for an EKG to her skin. She hadn't requested a female doctor and was perfectly comfortable being shirtless with me. She just wanted to find out what was wrong with her. I'm a paralegal, she said quickly between breaths. I hear that's hard work. Is that true? It may seem weird to have a casual conversation with someone in the throes of a panic attack, but casual conversation and focusing on simple familiar topics can help ease people through them. Also, though I've never read this in medical literature, I believe talking can help regulate their breathing and return their CO2 levels back to normal. It can be, but I like it. She laughed. Probably the cognitive dissonance of making a positive statement while feeling so terrible. It was good to release a little tension. I smiled at her and applied the last pad. I turned on the machine, and it began spewing out a paper readout of spikes and troughs telling me all about the state of Abby's heart. I said, "All right, I'm going to make sure your heart is looking. I don't see anything here that really concerns me. In fact, your heart is pretty strong. This is what I would expect to see in someone around 18 years old." Well, no, because their heart still has a little developing to go. But this is peak performance here. Are you an athlete? I like to run, she said. With each passing second, her breaths became farther apart. That'll do it. I've always wanted to run a marathon. And I think I could physically, but it's the time commitment. I don't think I could fit the training into my schedule. I've never done anything like that. I just do a few miles every day or two. Her voice sounded tired now, almost drunk. That happens sometimes to people when they come down from the panic, and the adrenaline goes but leaves the endorphins to make the person feel high. I glanced at the pulse oximeter on her finger, about to stop the EKG, when I noticed her heart rate was now 60. That can't be right. I grabbed her wrist, and in the 15 seconds it took me to check her pulse, her heart rate had dropped to 40. I called for a nurse. I glanced at the readout from the EKG and saw that it had changed from one belonging to a young runner to one that would be a good candidate for a pacemaker. Hey, Abby, did you take anything before arriving at the hospital for your anxiety? Your heart rate's a little low, so I'm going to give you a medication to... I read HR 30 on the pulse ox. Dear God, I don't remember if I said that out loud or thought it. I hope I only thought it. But I don't know if it would have changed anything. She already knew something was wrong. Her eyes widened and she reached for my hand. Her heart rate shot back to 60 briefly as she struggled to keep her head up before falling back onto the examination table. The paper continued to print from the EKG, the spikes and troughs cutting sharply to a flat line that would stretch on forever if I didn't turn the machine off. I realized I was clutching her hand in mine. I let it go and it hung off the end of the table, limp, dead. Story 7. I used to work finding supernatural apparitions, but what I saw made me quit everything. For over 50 years, I have worked investigating the supernatural. My whole family worked in this field. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence, many people disbelieved them. Even so, they taught me everything they knew, and it has been passed down through generations, but none of my descendants have shown any interest, and that worries me. But something changed during my childhood. I was born in 1965, and I witnessed the growth and evolution of photos and videos on camera. It was possible to obtain evidence, but only from those in poor condition, imperfect cameras that show imperfections in reality. People, often disbelieving but desperate, brought me photos to analyze. Those with something supernatural were to be burned. I have countless stories and have learned a great deal about all kinds of apparition, various types of demons, obsessive spirits, shadows, false gods, events that can't happen, doppelgangers, ghosts, and they all saw it and came to me. I edited the photos to make whatever was there more visible. When it was a demon, the photo was always accompanied by something. The person would report things breaking without explanation, insects appearing in their house, and blood dripping from the keyholes in the doors. In these cases, it even happened that sometimes people close to those who sought my help made pacts and promised the soul of the person who spoke to me. In these cases, the person would go through several near-death experiences. The photo was proof. It was a disfigured, somewhat animalistic, dark red face that appeared when edited. But of course, this is just the most common demon. There are various types of demons, including succubus/incubus, oni, yokai, and such. Honestly, it's been a while since I told these stories, so I want to tell several. If you're interested in any of them, don't hesitate to ask. Obsessive spirits also had effects on the person. They felt followed and always reported that they could feel winds even with the house closed, touches with no one around, and it was pure paranoia and she showed me the photo. It was exactly as predicted. A dark creature with intense eyes stared at its victim, almost waiting to do something, learning, watching. The shadows were always the ones that intrigued me the most, and even scared me, because of the unknown. It was impossible to predict what they were, or what they wanted. Nothing changed in a person's life, and sometimes the photo was from a long time ago precisely because nothing changed. They were just humanoid figures, either completely white or black. These are popular. You yourselves have probably seen something like saints' faces on nonsensical things, and many even find it cool. But beware, the creature behind it wants to deceive you, to mislead you away from your faith, to faith it instead. You won't even notice when you start praying for it. When old photos show extra limbs on bodies, hands, arms, or something completely impossible, like something floating, that's always the most obvious thing to spot. The people with it tend to believe more of my words. To explain doppelgangers, I'll tell a story, but without revealing names, of course. Anyway, a mother had taken a picture of her young adult daughter, but in the photo, the daughter's kitten was seen lying on her feet. But at that moment, the father was at the vet with the cat. After the photo was burned, the family continued with their lives as normal. The cat is having a happy life now, don't worry. A story also helps to tell about the ghost. A father had arrived with a family photo, where only he, his wife, and his 17-year-old son should have been pictured. But next to the son there was another boy, looked like 7 years old. His skull was bleeding, he was crying blood, his skin was bluish. That's when his father told me the story. The older son had pushed his brother into a lake. He had been bullying him for a while, but this time the boy died drowned. It was necessary to burn the photo, so the boy could die in peace. Having explained the basic concepts, I should add that there are situations where a single creature can be 2 to 4 of those mentioned before. But there was one time that I could never have predicted. A tall man, dressed in a suit and elegant clothes, extremely pale and old. His eyes were not very visible because of his hat, but they were bright and seemed to pierce me. He didn't say anything. He just handed me a completely black photo. I didn't know what to expect, but I decided to look for something anyway. That's what I did. I helped people spiritually. After searching for a long time, I felt something holding me back, but there was nothing there. I thought I was dealing with an obsessive spirit myself, but it was much worse. My vision began to darken, black spots appeared, and what remained was blurry. I felt my skin begin to burn. It hurt as if all my blood was being drained from me. I almost fell out of my chair and I fainted, but just before I managed to focus on the photo, which was no longer dark, that's when I understood it was a picture of hell itself. And when I woke up, everything was normal. The picture wasn't on my computer. It was like I'd almost gone to hell for a second. The man wasn't there, written in blood on the floor where, "You can't do anything, give up or see my home again." I felt nauseous, but it was blood, and there was a nail in my throat that came out, hurting me a lot. My room smelled horribly of carrion. I could barely stand. I ran out and went straight to church, confessed, and did everything I could to stop it. I burned all the stuff in my house, and I restarted my life. But even today I feel watched, trapped while I sleep, and I frequently experience sleep paralysis. I want to pass my profession on to someone protect others, but honestly, nobody deserves this. Story 8. Something on the beach is biting people on the butt. I was at the beach today with my mates Talon and Lizzie. We were just sitting around waxing our boards, sipping cold eyes before we planned to hit the surf. The sun was high in the sky, wispy clouds streaking toward the horizon, and the sand's warmth melted through my wet eye as the sea breeze blew my hair in my face. I was looking out at the horizon, and a blonde girl walked by in what could generously be called swimmers. As I observed the amount of tanning lotion-covered skin on her body, I saw something weird. On her left arched cheek, a round red mark oozed blood from several punctures around the edges. "Oi!" I called out to her. She glanced back and pulled her nose up at me. I pointed at her and instantly realized my mistake. She scoffed, flipped me off, and kept walking. I stood up and jogged after her. Wait, you got a dash. Listen, asshole. She spun with fury in her eyes and spoke in an American accent. I didn't fly halfway around the world to get catcalled by some ugly jerk-off. I was taken aback and stuttered out, "But you dash." "Screw off, creep. I just want to get back in the water. Leave me alone." I watched her go, blood still oozing down her tan leg as she made her way toward a group of her friends. I turned defeated back to Talon and Lizzie, who were both in a fit of giggles. "I think she fancies you, Ewan," barked Talon. "Worst she could say is no, right?" said Lizzie, throwing her head back. "You guys didn't see it?" "Oh, we saw and heard everything." "That's rough, mate," said Talon. "I didn't know you were into American Sheilas," said Lizzie, still giggling. "I didn't know she was American. But didn't you see? She was bleeding from her backside." I said, flopping down next to my board. "Mate, you can't say that," said Talon, almost spitting out his beer. "Oh, no. His mom hasn't told him about that yet," Lizzie said. "It was a bite mark. She had some kind of bite mark, and it was bleeding. I was just trying to help." Okay, mate, whatever lets you hit on Americans." I shook my head and went back to waxing my board. Talon stood up. All this laughing has me on the verge of pissing myself. "Hurry back," Lizzie said, giving him a smack on the arse as he got up and called him something that made the Americans all turn their heads. Lizzie and Talon had a weird on-again, off-again romance going. And this time it seemed like something might actually come of it, given we were close to graduating university. Talon told me he was thinking about buying a ring, and I figured it was a good time for him to finally wise up and grow a pair. "You know we're just joking, right?" Lizzie's tone turned sympathetic. Yeah, whatever," I said, looking over at the American girls sunbathing farther down the beach. "There's a shield out there for you. Maybe just stick with Aussies, though," she said, smiling sweetly. I know. I wasn't paying her much mind, instead trying to see if anyone else had noticed the girl's affliction. We laid on the beach and waited for Talon to come back. It took a while. When he eventually got back, he was walking lopsided, like as what I didn't fit right. "Why you walking so funny? Got a stiffy?" I said. "Rack off," he said. "What took you so long?" Lizzie said, "Had to take a dump. Toilet was bleeding uncomfortable, and my leg fell asleep while I was trying to pinch it off. Come on, I'm frothing for surf." He picked up his board and walked toward the water. Lizzie and I followed. As we approached the edge of the waves, a mum 30 meters down the beach screamed, "My son, he's stuck in the rip. Somebody help him." She pointed into the waves where a little boy of maybe 7 bobbed up and down, struggling and gasping. Lizzie, Talon, and I all dropped our boards and ran into the waves. He couldn't have been more than 20 meters from the shore. I ran in, cool water embracing me. I dove into the base of a wave and swam hard, all the years of surfing paying off as my arms rhythmically pulsed against the blue. The boy thrashed and tried to yell, water making him cough and sputter, before he was dunked by the next wave. I could feel the rip current dragging him and me out. I kicked hard over the next wave, reaching to grab him. The mop of blonde hair went under as his hand brushed my fingertips. I dove and grabbed him by the waist, kicking hard and then breaching the surface. The boy struggled, retching and heaving against me, kicking my legs as I tried to tread water. "It's okay, I got you," I said, breathing heavily as I tried to calm him down. Lizzie and Talon were there an instant later, and together we took turns slowly moving the boy back to the shore against the rip current. He kept coughing and gasping. By the time we could stand on the sand, a pair of lifeguards and a small crowd of people had gathered to meet us. They hauled the boy out of the surf and checked on him as he coughed furiously. The mother thanked us, and we stood around long enough to make sure he was okay. As the lifeguards checked him, I budged through the crowd to kneel next to him after he had stopped coughing. "Looks like you must have gotten caught up on a rock," one lifeguard said. "Got a scrape through your swimmers. Grab that towel." The other lifeguard grabbed a towel and patted it against the boy's backside. There was a near circular rip in the shorts with blood starting to soak them. "You good, mate?" Almost turned into a shark biscuit there. I said, try my best to imitate the comforting smile of an authority figure. The boy had the glazed-over look of shock on his face, and I faintly heard him mumble, "I want to get back in the water." "I think you've had enough water for the day, mate," said the second lifeguard, chuckling. "We'd better get a doctor to check you out." They helped him up, and the crowd started to disperse. The first lifeguard stood and stepped toward us. "Good job, you three, and thanks. That could have been bad. Almost the second one today. You lot all right?" "Yeah, I think we're good." "We good to hit the surf?" said Talone. "Yeah, I'm not worried about you. Try to relax and have a good time." We retrieved our boards and swam out to catch some waves. It was a perfect afternoon, and it helped relieve the tension after coming off the adrenaline high. Cool water, warm sun, a slight breeze, and great waves drowned all our worries. Surfing has a way of doing that for us three. Uni and shitty families, and being broke didn't matter when you were standing on a board, wind your hair, the power of the ocean behind you. I call it nirvana. About an hour and a half after we had caught our first wave, I was floating on my board waiting for another one when something bumped my board. I was staring at the shore when the nudge brought me back to reality. I looked down into the water and watched a 4-meter great white shark gracefully glide under my board. All the tension that faded away sprang back into my body. Its powerful tail fin nicked my board as I watched its dorsal fin rise out of the water. The little cleaner fish followed it as I watched the fin circle like a knife being brandished by a thug. Then it turned and headed directly for Talone, who floated 30 meters away next to Lizzie. "Oi, Talone!" I yelled, waving frantically. "Shark!" I motioned with a hand above my head, like a fin, and pointed toward him. He turned to see me motioning. Then his eyes got wide as he was a fin for himself. He mouthed a curse and started paddling, Lizzie in stride with him. I paddled with all my might, yelling and trying to splash, hoping the shark might be distracted by me. My heart leapt into my throat as I felt another tug on my board and saw 2 hammerheads circling below me, more cleaner fish circling with them like vultures in a watery sky. I swam as fast as I could. Lizzie screamed. I heard a snap as Talone cried out in pain, and the temperature of my guts matched the temperature of the water. As a wave lifted me out of the surf, I saw Lizzie floating next to Talone on her board, trying to pull them both along. A trail of red billowed behind them from a bite on Talone's leg, like red smoke from a signal fire summoning danger. My adrenaline surged as I pushed my arms faster, reaching them in a few seconds. Talone was glassy-eyed, coughing and flailing to stay afloat, while Lizzie searched the waves with a panicked gaze for the shark. Ragged screams escaped her mouth with each thrash, but as I pulled alongside Talone's crackboard, I yelled loud enough to snap her out the trance. "Lizzie, swim!" Within a few seconds, our sink strokes pushed us in front of a cresting wave, boosting us towards the shore. As my feet kicked in open water, dread filled my mind as I waited for my legs to become chum. The red cloud of blood swirled as I kicked, creating an atmosphere of chaos and despair, waiting to be cut through by a pristine predator. The wave carried us forward into water, shallow enough to stand, and we dragged ourselves and Talone onto the beach. He screamed as his injured leg dragged against the sand, and once we were out of waves, I turned to see how terrible damage truly was. It was eerie to see such a clean chunk taken out his thigh, semicircular, as if some child had done an arts and crafts project on his leg. Blood seeped from the wound and colored the sand. As Talone groaned, Lizzie looked at me in total shock. "Take his wet eye off." I said, "Stop the bleeding." We unzipped his wetsuit. Thankfully, he was wearing swimmers underneath, though they had a biscuit cutter rip to match his wetsuit. I remembered rudimentary first aid classes from school, and so I took the arm of his wetsuit and tied it around his leg just above the wound. As I cinched down hard on the knot, Talone screamed and thrashed onto his side. Lizzie tried to shush him and held his head, tears streaking down her face. As he rolled onto his side, I got a good look at the bite. Layers of skin and muscle oozed and spurted blood into the open air, like a sink slowly filling itself. I checked to make sure the tourniquet was high enough, then saw there was blood leaking through his shorts higher up his leg. I tore at the rip to expose another bite mark on his glut. This wasn't like the crater the shark had made. While also circular, it didn't look like a chunk of flesh had broken away. Puncture wounds lined it, contributing a steady flow to the pool of red already on the sand. In my hesitation, the lifeguards rushed to Talon with a first aid kit. A medical Uda had pulled farther on the beach, and a lifeguard got out and carried a stretcher to us. The lifeguards fixed a new tourniquet on Talon's leg, though he reacted with only medium discomfort this time since he had lost so much blood. As we lifted and carried him to the Uda, Talon said my name through shaky breaths. "Yeah, mate?" I leaned down to hear the words he mouthed. "I want to get back in the water." He held my gaze as we kept hauling. "You're going to be okay, mate," I said, unsure what to reply. "We only have room for one," said one of the lifeguards to me and Lizzie. We looked at each other, tears on my cheeks now matching hers. "You better go. Keep talking to him. I'll take the car," I said. Lizzie, lip quivering, nodded and gave me a quick hug. She got in the seat next to Talon. I was hit with sand spray as the Uda tore off up the beach. I returned to the waterline to pick up our boards, try to cheer myself with thoughts of how mad Talon would be if I left his board with a rocking bite mark in it after he lost a chunk of his leg. The waves crashed on the bloody sand. The ocean was a friend no more, as people had hurriedly gotten out of the water after the shark attack. As I dragged the boards up the beach, I passed people gathering their belongings, though some just stood and stared out at the waves, trying to catch a glimpse of the shark that was digesting a section of my friend's leg. The sand felt too hot under my feet, the waves too loud in my ears, and the wind too violent against my face. The song of the gulls was cruel. I made my way up the beach to the bathroom, and with a shaking hand, opened the door. I sighed in relief as the sun's light vanished around me and cool concrete met my shoes. I settled myself on the toilet and put my face in my hands, blocking out the remaining light. A sharp pain pinched me through my wetsuit, and I stood in alarm. I turned and looked at the toilet. In the bottom of the bowl, circling in the clear water, was a small black fish about the size of my hand. It had a dorsal fin that stuck out of the water, and two beady black eyes like a shark. As I stood over the bowl, it dove and then rose to the surface, showing that it had no lower jaw or gills. Its teeth were arrayed in a circle like a leech or a lamprey. It jumped a few inches out of the water, as if inviting me to play with it. I turned and dashed out of the bathroom, but my left leg was already going numb, and so I stumbled through the door into harsh sunlight and the person waiting in line. I looked up from the sound to see the American girl from earlier standing over me, a blank look on her face. "Sorry, I'm sorry," I blurted, face flushing. "About that, and about earlier, I didn't mean..." I trailed off as I noticed she wasn't even looking at me. I followed her gaze past me to where I heard waves crashing and gulls screeching. Except it wasn't gulls screeching, it was people screaming. Many of them stood at the water's edge and yelled. There were still a bunch of people just standing on the beach staring at the waves. I looked at the water and the hundreds of dorsal fins cutting through its surface, like some blender of monstrous proportions. I watched as the American girl sprinted past me toward the ocean, blonde hair flowing behind her, and in the spot where the bite mark had been was one of those tiny black fish. When she hit the water, her body vaporized into red pigment as dozens of sharks leapt onto her in a feeding frenzy. The others standing and watching the water, each with similar bite marks, ran after her. They were devoured in seconds. Those unaffected by the bite that tried to save their loved ones met a similar fate. I watched people silently flailing in a shoreline of red, faces unchanged as they were consumed in the meat grinder fins. The waves turned blood red, soaking the sand into a crimson coastline littered with specks of flesh. I turned and ran. I drove my car as far into the outback as I could. Lizzie has been calling me nonstop for the rest of the day. I'm too afraid to pick up the phone. I'm scared to drive anywhere. I know if I start the car again, I'll drive back to the beach. I know that because I want to get back in the water. Story 9. My dad once took me to the weirdest pawn shop. When I was really little, something nasty got into my blood. Daddy took me to every hospital he could, until he'd run out of money. And he said, we should all just pray harder. Daddy said, God, let my child get leukemia. I'll take my chances with the devil. I've never figured out how Daddy first came across the business card. All it said was, A, kindly, and a phone number. No address for where the shop was, or what hours it stayed open. Daddy had to call to get that information. He said the voice on the other end was a woman's. There was no sign out front. The building wasn't so much small as it was narrow, impossibly squeezed between a chiropractic clinic and an empty ice cream shop. That whole part of town was sketchy. Every store window had metal bars on it, except for the pawn shop, as if the owner wasn't scared about being robbed. Upon stepping inside, it became clear there wasn't much worth stealing. Maybe I'd spent more time in pawn shops than a lot of kids my age, but in my experience, shelves were usually stocked with jewelry and guns. In this one, however, shelves were full of jars filled with formaldehyde, with bits of body parts floated inside. I could have imagined they'd come from animals, like the kind my cousins dissected in their science classes. Then I saw the jar full of fingers, and my imagination failed me. But even that wasn't the weirdest thing about the store. A bell rang when me and Daddy entered. A man came out from the back room to stand behind the counter. He had this black mask on, with a long bird beak. The kind of thing you'd see at a masquerade ball, or an orgy, I guess. He wore a black top hat as well, but the rest of his outfit was colorful. Loud shades of purples and reds, like he'd taken the ends of a rainbow and crushed them together. His lips were just barely visible under his mask. He smiled. Salutations. I'm Mr. Kindly. I spoke with your assistant over the phone. Daddy said, I have no assistant. Mr. Kindly breathed in, a sound like a crow cawing. There was a girl. Daddy insisted. It's just me working here. Mr. Kindly bent his head, so the whites of his eyes stood out, the way a dog looks when it's begging or in trouble. Daddy made a non-committal grunt. What's going on with this place? I asked. Daddy tried shushing me, but Mr. Kindly chuckled. You see, child, every person in this world has something they want to get rid of but can't. A physical ailment, an addiction, a personality flaw, a mental compulsion, a bad memory, unwanted responsibilities, guilt, a cursed object. Everyone has their reason for coming here. It's not my place to ask why. I'm merely the individual who takes away the thing that a person wants gone. All questions are answered there. Mr. Kindly pointed to a sign on the adjacent wall, though I only saw the list of rules once. Every word is still burned into my memory. I doubt I'll ever be able to forget. They went, 1. The mission of the franchise is to cause pain and spread fear. This must be explicitly stated to all potential customers. It will be known to the public. 2. More than one franchise may operate in the same jurisdiction. Cordiality is expected in any interactions that may occur between said franchises. The junior establishment will show deference to the senior. No employee may harm another employee or else. 3. The franchise's rules are not set by any manager, worker, nor customer. Rules exist outside chronology and thus are beyond alteration. 4. Potential customers are encouraged to attempt to find loopholes in the franchise house rules, as it is highly entertaining to see them fail. 5. Potential customers may phrase their offers as creatively as they will. No matter the syntax, however, the franchise is unable to give, only to take. 6. There is no limit to what the franchise can take from a customer. Physical, abstract, esoteric, all are fair game. 7. Whatever is sold to the franchise must be the solely owned property of the customer. 8. Keep your soul to yourself. The franchise had no use for that wretched thing. 9. Prices charged by the franchise are not set by the franchisor. They are determined by how much distress they cause the customer. Consequently, price will naturally vary from customer to customer. There is no use trying to bargain or barter over price. 10. Sales are non-transferable. The one making the sale must be the one to pay. Altruistic self-sacrifice on behalf of another is contrary to the previously stated goals of the franchise. 11. All sales are final. Nothing that is removed can be returned, as it is not kept but obliterated. 12. All sales are confidential. No one except the seller may recall the previous state of affairs. Not even the franchisor involved in the sale. 13. The franchise always takes its pound of flesh. Pain and fear. Daddy breathed deeply. Fine. As long as you can take away what you claim to. I'm ready to make my deal with the devil. There wasn't any fear in his voice. His even tone never wavered. Not the devil, actually. Mr. kindly put a hand to his breast, aghast at the suggestion. I've always tried to stay out of politics. I'm but a mere pawnbroker. Now, the store doesn't take money, nor gold, nor cowrie shells. Only flesh, and in return, we take something undesirable off your hands, permanently. How do you stay in business? Daddy asked. When the landlord comes to kick me out, I'll disappear, Mr. Kindly said brightly. Why are you wearing that mask? I blurted out. Oh, I was having a party downstairs. A costume party? Daddy asked. Sure. You're lying. I said, I'm joking. Mr. Kindly responded. That's a whole other beast. The truth is somewhat embarrassing, but if it will sate your simian-like curiosity, I'll tell you. They say dress for the job you want, not the job you have. And whoever they are, I agree with them. And it just so happens, I love carnivals. You want to work in a circus? I asked. A carnival, he corrected. I've wanted to have my own since I was a boy, and that was a long time ago. How long? I asked. Before Mr. Kindly could answer, Daddy pressed ahead. I'll do anything to make my baby healthy again. Daddy's hands came together in a gesture half prayer, half groveling. A pound of flesh. I know what that means. Just tell me where you want it from. Mr. Kindly tapped his finger on Rule 7 and Rule 10. All sales are non-transferable. I don't make the rules. I didn't make this shop. You did. All of you. And I can't leave until I collect enough pounds to buy my own carnival. Little girl, it's you who will be cured, so it's you who must pay. I nodded hesitantly. Pay what? Oh, if you were a musician or a painter, I might take your hands. Mr. Kindly bent over the counter. If you were a singer, I might take your vocal cords. He was already tall and skinny, but the way he moved, it seemed like he didn't have a spine. He contorted himself until his beak tapped my nose. If you were a gourmand, I might take your tongue. Daddy moved between me and Mr. Kindly. Not happening. Oh, those were just hypothetical scenarios. Mr. Kindly waved dismissively. The franchise itself will decide the price to get clean out her blood. Franchise, I thought. I'd never heard the word before. What does it mean? The franchise refers to the store itself, Mr. Kindly said, like he'd read my mind. He pushed open the counter's half door. He walked out into the main store. I noticed that Mr. Kindly was barefoot. His toenails were long and black. Mr. Kindly tossed aside a sheet I'd mistaken for a window curtain. Instead of a view outside, there was a mirror from floor to ceiling. The glass was clean, but it glowed green. Uranium glass, Mr. Kindly said. Perfectly harmless, unless you eat it. From his belt, he took out a measuring tape. Instead of numbers, there were odd shapes, like pictures. I was later told they were hieroglyphics. Stand here, Mississippi. I looked at Daddy. His expression was usually easy to read. Now I had no idea. He seemed frozen in place, hands shoved into his pockets. I trotted over to the mirror. Mr. Kindly clicked his tongue as he measured the size of my head, my height, my width, all while never touching. Hum. Mr. Kindly sounded happy. Stand before the mirror. He stepped aside. I stared into the mirror. Something was wrong. I turned my head, then back. I hadn't been mistaken. The mirror only reflected me, not the background. Don't blink. Mr. Kindly had sounded friendly since I had met him, but his voice suddenly turned cold. Those two words were a stern order. I widened my eyes, trying hard not to blink. I stood there for a minute. Then, too, Mr. Kindly clapped, tucking away his tape measure. All done. What happened? I asked. The franchise is decided, Mr. Kindly said, as if that meant anything to us. Follow me. He led Daddy and me to the front door. We exited the shop. Mr. Kindly looked up. His eyes scanned the sky, like he was expecting an asteroid or plane to crash down at any moment. All clear. I can go this far at least. He led us to the ice cream parlor. It had a closed sign out front. Mr. Kindly had no key. He tapped his fingernail, black and curved, like his toenails, against the keyhole. The door swung open. The insides were coated in dust. The place had no power. But Mr. Kindly came out of a freezer with a barrel of ice cream, half his size. He plopped it down on the counter. How about a treat before we make the sale? At no extra charge, naturally. There were no cones, but he fished out some bowls from under the counter. Mr. Kindly scooped out one bowl for me and one for Daddy. The ice cream was Neapolitan. He hung around while we ate, sort of perching on the counter. I'm on a liquid diet. He explained why he didn't make his own bowl. I didn't realize how hungry I felt. Something sugary really hit the spot. Mr. Kindly gave me a second helping, then washing the ice cream scoop in the sink. Daddy's ice cream melted. He wouldn't eat. Mr. Kindly snatched the bowl and drank from it. Daddy crossed his arms. What's going to happen? Mr. Kindly punched him across the face. Blood shot out of Daddy's nose. The cartilage was broken. He fell on the cold tiles. Mr. Kindly stepped over him. He still held the ice cream scoop. I'm sorry to say, miss, but this will hurt a lot. Eyes are a popular choice. But at least your father will never know. I won't be leaving any receipts. Mr. Kindly grabbed me. He was strong enough to carry the ice cream tub and to knock out Daddy with a single strike. So he was strong enough to lift me in the air one-handed. Before he took the ice cream scoop to my eyes, Mr. Kindly tore off his mask. To think, that horrible face was the last thing I ever saw. It was scarred and blistered and rotted, but worst of all, it wasn't human. The feel of cold metal, reaching past my eyelid to get my corneas. Optic nerve pulled out until they finally snapped, and then having to experience the process all over again, all the while biting, hitting, kicking, and crying, trying and failing to escape this demon. Then my ears popped, and I was lying on my bed. It was morning, and Daddy was making breakfast. I smelled the bacon. I stumbled around my bedroom. It was like I was still asleep. Everything was dark, but whenever I tried opening my eyes, it didn't work. According to Daddy, when I finally found him, I was born blind, but that didn't make any sense. I could too see Daddy. I pouted. The man had a suit, all red and purple, and a big top hat. His face was covered by a black bird mask. How could you know what color is? Daddy chuckled nervously. Did Annie tell you about them? I went to the same school, but was in an entirely different class. When I was there, I tried to tell the other kids what had happened. One of the boys believed me, but everyone else just laughed. I finally stopped mentioning the pawn shop when Tyler started bullying me. I shut down for years. For decades, I wouldn't talk about it or even write about it. It was about survival. A story like mine would get you sent to the funny farm. But I thought about it. Oh, every day I've thought about that, Mr. Kindly. Every day I think about what was under that bird mask. New experiences still prove hard for me. But when I watch a video I'd seen before making the sale, I can almost picture the movie in my head, like the skin across my face were its own black screen. I could describe exactly what's happening on the screen to anyone watching with me. They think it's a trick, that I have no idea what color the heroine's gown was. They say someone sighted told me that. Colors. That's what I miss most about having eyes. It's true what they say about getting blinded. Your other senses enhance. Maybe I enjoy food and music more than the average person. Getting around took some years, but I've mastered it. In fact, I picked up a little bit of echolocation. If you happen to see me on the street, tapping my cane, don't try to help me. It's embarrassing. At least I don't have gross empty eye sockets. In this new world that Mr. Kindly and I created, there's a flap of skin over the place where my eyes would be. Daddy and Annie insist that I was born with it. The skin over my eyes itches most of the time, reminding me that things used to be different, though I have no proof except my memories. Memories of a world that was destroyed and restarted. Every detail of the new world playing out the same, save for me not getting leukemia. In case you're wondering, the pawn shop isn't there anymore. I've taken car rides to where I'm certain it used to be, but there's no space between the chiropractor's office and the ice cream parlor. I felt the shared wall with my hands. Off in the distance that day, I heard a massive cawing. Just crows, obviously, but I was reminded of Mr. Kindly's tortured breathing. Okay, fine, maybe it's the wrong spot. There's got to be other places where a chiropractor's office and ice cream parlor are next to each other, but that's not what I think. I think the pawn shop's still somewhere out in the world. Maybe Mr. Kindly's still running it. Maybe my eyes were the last thing he needed to buy his carnival, and some other demons working the franchise. And while we're talking about maybes, maybe you'll stumble into a weird store one of these days. An unnamed pawn shop with organs suspended in jars, a list of bizarre rules, and a promise to remove anything from you that you can't get rid of. And maybe the price that's asked will be worth it for you. Who am I to judge? I've lived longer blind than I would have with cancer. That being said, my price was comparatively light. Still have 4 perfectly working senses, and my balance. I also had my history change very early in my life. Imagine being an adult and suddenly having a whole other life. There's no guarantee your family, your friends, your spouse, or your kids would still be the same, if they even exist at all. Not only have you lost flesh and blood, you now have to fake any interaction you have from then on. Inside jokes you don't get. Grudges held with complete strangers. Major milestones you cannot remember. Better hope your alternate self took a lot of photos. From survivors of the franchise, it can feel less like being free of a curse, and more like suddenly stepping into the life of someone else who just so happened to share your face. Makes sense that lots of people couldn't handle the change. Blindness isn't the worst thing, but it definitely puts distance between you and others. I spent a lot of time with darkness, just wondering, and I'm sure that our mental asylums host some who paid their pounds of flesh, couldn't keep up with a new lie, and now rant and rave in rubber rooms, because they're the only ones who can remember how the world used to be. How many different jars did I see in the pawn store? At least 100. Each removed organ a different person who changed the world and had the old one destroyed. Hundreds, thousands, maybe millions, with all that eternal darkness. You'd think I would sleep better, but I stay up at night, worrying about cosmic deeds I got no control over. So I'm breaking my silence, telling my story, putting out the word that if you ever happen to see a man in a black bird mask, and he offers to take something heavy off your soul, or a monkey on your back, be really, really sure your burden truly is something you can't go on living with. You've been warned. Story 10. What we saw in the bog still haunts us. This story happened a few years back when I was still a university student. By the time I was in my second year, I started seeing this girl by the name of Lauren. We had been dating through most of that year, and although we were still young, I was already convinced this bonny Irish girl with faint freckles on her cheeks was the one I'd eventually settle down with. In fact, things were going so well between Lauren and me that I foolishly agreed to meet her family back home. Lauren's parents lived in the Irish Midlands, only an hour or 2 outside of the city. After taking a short flight from England, we made our way off the motorway and onto the country roads, where I was surprised to see how flat everything was. In contrast with the mountainous, rugged land I always imagined the Emerald Isle being, Lauren's parents lived in a very small but lovely country village, home to no more than 400 people, and surrounded by many farms, cow fields, and a very long stretch of bogland. Like any boyfriend going to meet their girlfriend's family for the first time, I was very nervous. But because of the historic tension that still exists between Ireland and England, I was more nervous than I really should have been. After all, What Irish parent wants to hear their daughters bringing home an Englishman? As it turned out, I had no reason to be so worrisome, as I found Lauren's parents to be nothing but welcoming. Her mum was very warm and comforting, as Lauren said she would be, and her dad was a polite, old-fashioned sort of gent. There's no sir here. You can call me John. His first words were to me, a couple of days and heavy dinners later. Things were going surprisingly smooth, although Lauren's parents had taken a shine to me, which included their border collie Dexter. My mind still wasn't at ease. For some reason, I had this very unnerving feeling, as though something terrible was eventually going to happen. I just assumed it was nervous jitters from meeting the family. But nevertheless, something about it didn't feel quite right, almost like a warning. On the third night of our stay, this uneasy feeling was still with me, so much so that I just couldn't fall asleep, staring up at the ceiling through the darkness. I must have remained in that position for hours. By the time the dawn is seeping through the bedroom curtains, I check my phone to realize it is now 6 a.m. Accepting no sleep is going to come my way. I plan to leave Lauren, sleeping peacefully, to go for a stroll down the country roads. Accidentally waking her while I got dressed, Lauren being Lauren, insists that we go for an early morning walk together, bringing Dexter, the family dog, with us, along with ball and hurling stick to play with. We follow the road that leads out of the village, eventually passing by the secluded property of a farm. We then find ourselves on the outskirts of a bog. Although Lauren grew up here all her life, she had never once explored this bog before, as until recently, it was a private property of a peat company, which has since gone out of business. Taken to exploring the bog, the three of us then stumble upon a trail that leads through a man-made forest. It seems as though the further we walk, the more things we discover, because following the very same trail through the forest, we next discover a narrow railway line once used for transporting peat, which cuts through the artificial trees. Now, feeling curious as to where this railway may lead us, we leave the trail to follow along it, stepping over the never-ending rows of wooden planks. Lauren and I suddenly hear a rustling far out in the trees. Whatever it is, it sounds large, and believing it's most likely a deer, I squint my tired eyes through the dimness of the woods to see it. But what I instead see is the faint silhouette of something peeking out from behind a tree at me, trying to blink the blurriness from my eyes. The silhouette looks no clearer to me, leaving me wondering if what I'm seeing is another person or an animal. What is that? I ask Lauren, just as confused as I to what this was. Continuing to stare at the silhouette a while longer, Lauren, with more efficient eyes than my tired own, finally provides an identity to what this unknown thing is. I think it's a cow. She answers me, though her face appears far from convinced. It probably belongs to the Doyle farm we passed by. Pulling the phone from her pocket, Lauren then uses a camera to zoom in on whatever is watching us. And while I wait for her to confirm what this is through the pixels on her screen, the uneasy feeling that's ailed me for the past 3 days only strengthens, until, breaking the silence around us, Lauren wails out in front of me, "Oh my God!" What Lauren sees through the screen, staring back at us from inside the forest, is the naked body of a human being. It's pale, bare arms clasped around the tree it hides behind. But what stares back at us, with seemingly pure black, unblinking eyes and snow-white fur, is the head of a cow. "Babes, what is that?" Lauren frighteningly asks. I don't know," my trembling voice replies, unaware of my tired eyes deceive me or not. Upon sensing Lauren's and my own distress, Dexter becomes aware of the strange entity watching us within the trees, and with a loud, threatening bark, he races after this thing, like a hound on a fox hunt, disappearing through the darkness of the woods. "Dexter, no." Lauren yells, before chasing after him. "Lauren, don't go in there." She doesn't listen. By the time I'm deciding whether to go after her, Lauren was already gone. Afraid as I was to enter those woods, I was even more terrified by the idea of my girlfriend being in there with that thing. And so, swallowing my own fear as best I could, I reluctantly enter follow Lauren's yells of Dexter's name. The closer I come to her cries, the more panicked and hysterical they sound. She was reacting to something terrible. By the time I catch sight of her through the thin trees, I begin to hear other sounds, The sounds of deep growling and snarling, intertwined with low, soul-piercing groans. Groans of pain and torment. I catch up to Lauren, and I see her standing as motionless as the trees around us. And in front of her on the forest floor, I see what was making the horrific sounds. What I see is Dexter, his domesticated jaws clasped around the throat of this thing, as though trying to tear the life from it. In the process, staining the mossy white fur of its neck a dark currant red. The creature doesn't even seem to try and defend itself, as though paralyzed with fear, weakly attempting to push Dexter away with trembling human hands. Among Dexter's primal snarls and groans of the creature's agony, my ears are filled with Lauren's own terrified screams. "Do something," she screams at me. Beyond terrified myself, I know I need to take charge. I can't just stand here and let this suffering continue. Taking Lauren's hurl from her hands, I force myself forward with every step, close enough now to Dexter, but far enough that this thing won't buck me with its hind human legs. Holding the hurl up high, foolishly feeling the need to defend myself, I grab a hold of Dexter's loose collar, trying to jerk him desperately away from the tormented creature. But my fear of the creature prevents me from doing so, until I have to resort to twisting the collar around Dexter's neck, squeezing him into submission. Now holding him back, Lauren comes over to latch Dexter's lead onto him, barking endlessly at the creature with no off switch, even with the two of us now restraining him. Dexter is still determined to continue the attack, the cream whiteness of his canine teeth and the stripe of his snout, stained with the creature's blood. Tying the dog, we around a tree's narrow trunk. Keeping Dexter at bay, me and Lauren stare over at the creature on the ground, clawing at his open throat. Its bare legs scrape lines through the dead leaves and soil, and as it continues to let out deep, shrieking groans of pain, all me and Lauren can do is watch it suffer. Do something. Lauren suddenly yells at me, "You need to do something. It's suffering." What am I supposed to do? I yell back at her. Anything. I can't listen to it anymore. Clueless to what I'm supposed to do, I turn down to the ash with Lauren's hurl, still clenched in my now shaking right hand. Turning back up to Lauren, I see her eyes glued to it. When her eyes finally meet my own, among the strained yaps of Dexter and the creature's endless, inhuman groans, with a granting nod of her head, Lauren and I know what needs to be done. Possessed by an overwhelming fear of this creature, I still cannot bear to see it suffer. It wasn't human, but it was still an animal as far as I was aware. Slowly moving towards it, the hurl in my hand suddenly feels extremely heavy. Eventually, I'm stood over the creature, close enough that I can perfectly make out its ungodly appearance. I see its red, clotted hands still clawing over the loose, shredded skin of its throat. Following along its arms, where the blood stains end, I realize the fair pigmentation of its flesh is covered in an extremely thin layer of white fur. So thin, the naked human I can barely see it. Continuing along the jerk of its body, my eyes stop on what I fear to stare at the most, its non-human but very animal head, frozen in the middle between the swatting flaps of its ears and the abyss of its square, gaping mouth, having now fallen silent. I meet the pure blackness of its unblinking eyes. Staring this creature dead in the eye, I feel like I can't move, no more than a deer in headlights. I don't know for how long I was like this, but Lauren, free me of my paralysis, shouts over, "What are you waiting for?" Regaining feeling in my limbs, I realize the longer I stall, the more this creature's suffering will continue, raising the hurl to the air, with both hands firmly on the handle. The creature beneath me shows no signs of fear whatsoever. It wanted me to do it. It wanted me to end its suffering. But it wasn't because of the pain Dexter had caused it. I think the suffering came from its own existence. I think this thing knew it wasn't supposed to be alive. The way Dexter attacked the thing, it was as though some primal part of him also sensed it was an abomination, an unnatural organism, like a cancer in the body, raising the hurl higher above me. I talk myself through what I have to do, a hard and fatal blow to the head. No second tries. Don't make this creature's suffering any worse. Like a woodsman, ready to strike a fallen log with his axe, I stand over the cow-human creature, with nothing left to do but end its painful existence once and for all. But I can't do it. I can't bring myself to kill this monstrosity. I was too afraid. Dropping Lauren's hurl to the floor, I go back over to her and Dexter. Come on, we need to leave. We can't just leave it here, she argues. It's in pain. What else can we do for it, Lauren? I raise my voice to her. We need to leave. Now, we make our way out of the forest, continually having to restrain Dexter, still wanting to finish his kill. But as we do, we once again hear the groans of the creature, and with every column of tree we pass, the groans grow ever louder. Don't listen to it, Lauren. The deep, gurgling shriek of those groans, piercing through us both, it was calling after us. Later that day, and now safe inside Lauren's family home, we all sit down for supper, Lauren's mom having made a Sunday roast, although her parents are deep in conversation around the dinner table. Me and Lauren remain dead silent, sat across the narrow table from one another. I try to share a glance with her, but Lauren doesn't even look at me, motionlessly staring down at her untouched dinner plate. Aren't you hungry, love? Lauren's mom asks concernedly, replying with a single word. No. Lauren stands up from the table and silently leaves the room. Is she feeling unwell or anything? Her mom tries prodding me. Try and be quick on my feet. I tell Lauren's mom we had a fight while on our walk, although she was very warm and welcoming up to this point. For the rest of the night, Lauren's mom was somewhat cold toward me, as if she just assumed it was my fault for our imaginary fight, though he hadn't said much of anything. As soon as Lauren leaves the room, I turn to see her dad staring daggers at me, despite removing the evidence from Dexter's mouth, all while keeping our own mouths shut. I'm almost certain John knew something more had happened. The only question is, did he know what it was? Stumbling my way to our bedroom that night, I already find Lauren fast asleep, or at least pretending to sleep. Although I was so exhausted from the sleep deprivation and horrific events of the day, I still couldn't manage to rest my eyes. The house and village outside may have been dead quiet, but in my conflicted mind, I keep hearing the groans of the creature, as though its screams for help had reached all the way into the village and through the windows of the house. It was only 2 days later did Lauren and I cut our visit short, and if anything, I'm surprised we didn't leave sooner. After all, now knowing what lives or lived in the very place she grew up, Lauren was more determined to leave than I was. For anyone who asks, yes, Lauren and me are still together, though I'm afraid to say it's not for the right reasons. You see, Lauren still hasn't told her parents about the creature on the bog, nor have I told my own friends or family. Unwilling to share our supernatural encounter, or whatever you want to call it, with anyone else, all we really have is each other.